My billionaire ex-husband moved into my apartment complex last night. He has no idea his own twins sleep on the other side of the wall. One thin layer of paint and plaster is all that separates him from the son who has his eyes and the daughter who tilts her head exactly the way he does when she's curious. He walked past their stroller this morning, smiled at them like they were just some neighbor's kids, and kept going. If you've ever wondered what it feels like to hide the biggest truth of your life from the man who helped you create it, keep listening, because that's exactly where Flora's story begins. She didn't meet him in this hallway. Years earlier, she met him under crystal chandeliers at a downtown gala when she was a volunteer in a borrowed dress, and he was the man everyone whispered about. Back then, she didn't know she would one day trade glass walls and a hilltop view for a 2-bedroom unit and a second-hand double stroller, but here she is now. Early 30s, one arm around her daughter Emma, the other braced against the doorframe, as the man she once promised forever to stands in front of her in gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt saying, "I just moved in next door." He hears a baby fussing. He hears the white noise machine humming through the wall at night. He has no idea those sounds belong to the children who share his smile. Before we get into how it all went so wrong, and how this hallway moment blew her secret wide open, I need you to do something for me. If you're already hooked, please hit the like button and tap out a quick comment. It might seem small, but it genuinely helps YouTube push this story out to more people who need these lessons. Welcome back to Stories by Mr. Flex, where life's most powerful lessons come wrapped in unforgettable tales. If you're new to this family, thank you for joining us. Please hit the subscribe button because it helps us share stories like this on YouTube. Now, let's talk about you for a second. Have you ever loved someone so much that you slowly started shrinking yourself just to fit into their world? Have you ever stared at a beautiful life, nice house, nice view, shiny photos on social media, and quietly thought, if this is success, why am I so lonely? Have you ever walked away from comfort because your peace was worth more, even when nobody understood your decision? Or maybe you're a parent trying to raise a child with everything you've got while protecting them from people who might love them, but also might hurt them. If any of that sounds familiar, you're going to see pieces of yourself in Flora. Once upon a time, she was not the woman pushing a grocery cart with coupons tucked in her back pocket. She was the woman dancing in a glass kitchen in the Los Angeles hills, married to a man whose name showed up in business magazines, sleeping under a roof where the view looked like a movie scene every night. His name is Aaron. Billionaire real estate mind, the kind of man who can sign his name and change what a whole block looks like. To the outside world, he was that guy, the one who always wins, always lands the deal, never misses a step. To Flora, in the beginning, he was just the man who stepped away from the very important personable at a charity gala to joke with the volunteers, who asked her about the kids at the community art center she worked for, who danced with her to old Motown songs like no one else in the room mattered. They went from shared jokes over cheap punch to shared keys to a house in the hills. She left her job to paint, to build a life with him, to be ready when they decided to start a family. He promised to stand by her. She believed him. For a while they were happy, but some of you already know what happens when a person falls in love with their work more than the person waiting at home. The late nights started, the empty chair at gallery shows, the plate of food going cold on the counter, the "I'm doing this for us" speeches that sounded good but never turned into actual presents, the small hurt that grows every time a promise gets brushed aside. Flora didn't leave because of some scandal or some dramatic betrayal. She left because one night, in that huge house that never seemed to hold his full attention, she realized she felt more alone with him than she ever did by herself. So she picked up her overnight bag. She walked out. The papers got signed. The relationship that had once made everyone whisper goals online ended with 2 quiet signatures and a painful goodbye. What Aaron never knew, what she never told him, is that when she walked away from that mansion, she was already carrying more than her own hurt. A few weeks later, in a small bathroom that matched nothing about her old life, she stared down at a test with trembling hands and saw that small line appear. Her heart dropped and lifted at the same time. She was pregnant. Not just pregnant. Later she would find out there were 2 heartbeats, not one. Right here, I want you to ask yourself honestly, if you were Flora, would you have picked up the phone? Would you have called the man who missed your first art show, who let his mother treat you like a guest in your own marriage, who said he wanted a family when things calmed down while choosing every deal over every dinner? Or would you have done exactly what she did, push down the urge to call, close your mouth and decide to raise those babies on your own terms? Drop your answer in the comments. Call him or protect your peace. Which one would you have chosen in that moment? Flora chose to protect her peace. She moved out of that world of valet parking and silent hallways into a smaller place closer to her own people. She picked up work at a community center, teaching kids how to paint. Her mother flew in to hold her hand and boil soup when her back hurt and her feet swelled. She went to doctor appointments without him. She heard 2 heartbeats on a monitor and laughed through her tears. Emma and Ryan came into the world a year and 4 months ago, tiny and loud and perfect, 2 little blessings that did not care how big the house was, only that the arms holding them were steady. Flora built a new life, nothing fancy but real. Morning cartoons instead of endless emails, peanut butter on toast instead of catered breakfasts, diaper runs and late-night bottle washing instead of red carpets. Her friends joked that she went from glass castle to mom with a double stroller at the bus stop. She smiled and said, "I traded square footage for peace. I'm good." She saw Aaron's name pop up online once in a while. Another building, another award, photos of him in tuxes at events, sometimes with a woman at his side, sometimes alone. The sting mellowed with time, like a scar that still remembers the wound but no longer bleeds. What he never saw were the nights she rocked 2 crying babies at once, the mornings she went to work with spit up on her shoulder and still gave her students her best, the holidays she spent with her family, holding the twins up to the phone so relatives could coo over them. He never saw Emma's first steps across the worn carpet. He never heard Ryan's first attempt at mama, until the night he knocked on the wrong door, or maybe the right one. One late evening, Flora finally got both kids down. The apartment fell into that rare, precious silence that only parents of toddlers fully appreciate. She stretched out on the couch, mind buzzing with bills, lesson plans, and sheer exhaustion, and must have drifted off. A small cry crackled through the baby monitor. Emma again. Flora got up, soothed her, rocked her in the half-dark. That's when she heard it, a soft knock at the front door. Not loud, not aggressive, just 3 careful taps. Most people hear a knock and think it's no big deal, but when you're a single mother with 2 babies asleep in the next room, your brain runs through every possibility in 3 seconds. Is someone in trouble? Is something wrong in the building? Did I leave something in the laundry room? She walked to the door, Emma in her arms, and pressed her eye to the peephole. She expected the neighbor from across the hall, maybe the manager, someone with a package. Instead, she saw a familiar jawline, familiar hair, familiar shoulders. The hallway light glowed around his head just enough for her to see his face clearly. It was Aaron, in sweatpants, in her hallway. The last time she'd seen him in person, lawyers were passing papers across a polished table, and both of them were trying not to cry. Now he stood on the tired carpet outside her apartment, one hand still lifted from knocking, eyes fixed on her door. He had no idea that on the other side of that same wall, his son lay asleep with an arm stretched across a stuffed rabbit, and his daughter had just quieted down against Flora's shoulder. He didn't know his children were so close he could have heard them breathe if he pressed his ear to the drywall. He just knew he heard a noise, that the unit next to his felt occupied, and that curiosity pulled him there. This is where everything tightens. This is where secrets and second chances crash into each other in a hallway that smells like strong cleaner and somebody's leftover dinner. This is where Flora has seconds to decide, open the door and face the past, or pretend she's not home and protect the life she has built. Before we go further, I want you to know something. That hallway moment is not the last time her heart drops. Later, you're going to see Aaron sprint across a park to scoop their son out of the path of a moving van. You're going to hear the tremble in his voice when he finally asks, "They're mine, aren't they?" You're going to stand in that same apartment complex as his mother shows up uninvited, looks around, and realizes her grandchildren have been living in a place she once would have called beneath her son. You'll watch a man who used to bend for his family's expectations take a very different stand this time. So here's my question to you, the last one before we step fully into the story. Do you believe people can truly change once they see what their choices have cost? If you do, type second chances in the comments. If you don't, type once I's enough. I want to see where you're at as we walk this out. Because what happens between this hallway knock and the day Flora stands in a small church with her twins clapping in the front row isn't about fairy tale luck. It's about growth, boundaries, accountability, forgiveness, and a man finally learning that the real measure of success isn't square footage. It's who comes home to you at night. Stay with me till the end, because this isn't just drama for screen time. There are real lessons in Flora's story, about choosing yourself without closing your heart to love, about protecting your children while still leaving room for healing, and about what it costs when work becomes more important than the person right in front of you. Now let's step back to where it all truly started, before the knock, before the twins, before the mansion even felt empty. Flora didn't begin as a single mom in a small apartment. She began as a woman at a registration table, in a borrowed dress, trying to act like the glitter in that ballroom didn't make her feel small. Right up until a man named Aaron asked her one question that quietly changed her life. Do you want to dance? Flora didn't realize how easily a life could shift from warm and steady to stretch thin until she lived inside the shift herself. In the early days, her marriage felt like a simple rhythm, two people choosing each other every day, no matter how different their backgrounds were. But choices are like small turns of a wheel. If you keep turning in one direction long enough, you eventually end up facing a place you never meant to go. After their courthouse wedding, she tried to bring her world into that house in the hills. She hung up framed pictures of her childhood, photos of church picnics, her high school graduation, her parents holding her in matching shirts during a family reunion. She stocked the kitchen with spices she grew up using. She filled the rooms with warm colors and thrift store finds that didn't match the sleek, cold architecture, but made the space feel lived in. And Aaron tried too. That part mattered. He didn't wake up one morning deciding to change. The shift wasn't loud. It started like a whisper, hiding inside decisions that sounded reasonable at first. Babe, I'm meeting a developer from Chicago. I might be late. We're hosting a dinner for potential investors next Tuesday. Can you help me pick a menu? I know I said I'd be back for lunch, but something came up. Flora recognized stress when she saw it. She'd been raised to understand hard work. Her parents worked long hours, her mother juggling teaching and tutoring, her father coming home from postal routes with tired shoulders and stories about chatty customers. Success wasn't something Flora took lightly. She admired ambition. But admiration has limits when you're at home alone on your birthday, because your husband is at a so-called quick meeting that runs 3 hours past a promise. She tried to be understanding. In the first year, she still felt hope tucked under her ribs, pushing her to give grace again and again. She cooked dinner most nights, not because she felt obligated, but because she wanted to create a home. She left him encouraging notes on the fridge. She bought paint supplies with the intention of finally finishing a piece she'd set aside for months. But the mansion didn't make noise unless you turned on a speaker. Silence lived there, almost proudly. She would paint in the big room with tall windows, and every brushstroke felt like it disappeared before she could hear her own breathing. And then came the day Aaron suggested she leave her job at the Community Arts Center. He meant well. She truly believed that. He told her she deserved time to focus on her painting, that she shouldn't be exhausted by work and still have to run the house. Let me take care of us, he said. That's what I'm here for. It sounded loving. It sounded like partnership. But she didn't realize until later that taking away something that grounded her was the first step in her feeling lost. Her mother warned her in a gentle voice on the phone one night. Baby, a woman needs at least one thing in life that belongs only to her. Job, hobby, something. Don't let go of yourself. Flora had smiled, even though her heart pinched. I'll be fine, Mama. Painting is mine. And she did paint. But something changes when your creative work becomes your only tether to fulfillment. Some days she painted so she wouldn't cry. Some days she cried because she couldn't paint. And some days she painted because it was the only thing that didn't require her to ask for attention she wasn't getting. She didn't blame Aaron entirely. He hadn't lived in a world where people showed love through presents. His parents traveled more than they stayed home. They taught him how to access doors with connections, but they never taught him how to stay still long enough for someone to feel him beside them. Meanwhile, Flora came from a world where love was loud. Big family gatherings, crowded kitchens, her mother humming gospel songs as she cooked, an uncle calling out jokes from the living room, kids playing tag around grown-up legs. She'd grown up surrounded by warmth. It made a big house with wide hallways feel colder than it looked. Slowly, the house stopped being a home. It became a showroom with pretty things, and two tired people orbiting each other like strangers. One night, Flora cooked dinner. Her mother's recipe for baked chicken, seasoned to perfection, with sweet corn and homemade biscuits she'd worked hard to get right. She plated everything, using the fancy dinnerware his mother had gifted them, and waited. Aaron texted, "Running late. Start without me if you need to." She didn't start without him. She reheated the chicken twice. The biscuits lost their warmth. By the time he walked in, tie loosened, smile apologetic but distracted, Flora had packed away most of the dinner. She didn't cry that night. Tears didn't come easily anymore. Silence did. "Sorry," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. The investor call went long. "It's fine," she replied softly, even though they both knew it wasn't. She went to bed early, leaving him in the kitchen microwaving a plate of cold food he didn't know she'd made from scratch. The next morning, he kissed her forehead, but the gesture felt like something done out of habit, not passion. Still, she stayed. She kept building routines. She kept brushing the cracks, with hope, like trying to smooth wrinkles in a bedsheet that wouldn't lay flat. But the real shift came 6 months later. He had promised, truly promised, to attend her first art gallery showing. It was a small event at a little studio in West Hollywood, not the kind of place his wealthy circle would brag about visiting, but it meant everything to her. She had been nervous all week, choosing her dress, practicing how she'd greet guests, imagining Aaron holding her hand proudly. The night finally arrived. The studio was filled with soft lighting, background music, and local artists chatting over sparkling water and tiny appetizers. Flora stood in the center wearing a green dress that made her skin glow under the lights. She kept glancing at the door every time someone entered. He didn't show up at the start, or the first hour, or the second. By the time the event wrapped up, her smile felt like it was stapled to her face. When the studio owner congratulated her on a great turnout, Flora nodded politely, even though her heart felt like it had been stepped on. She drove home alone, the green dress suddenly feeling too bright for her mood. When Aaron finally walked in that night, loosening his tie like he always did, Flora was sitting on the edge of the bed, arms crossed at her waist, trying not to cry. "You promised," she whispered without looking at him. He froze. "Flora, I'm so sorry. The meeting ran long," she finished, voice flat. "Yes, it always does." He tried to explain, but explanations become noise when someone is hurting. That night, their argument wasn't explosive. It was quiet. Quiet in that way pain gets when it's too heavy to yell about. She slept at her friend's apartment that night. The next morning she looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. The girl who had danced with a man under chandeliers and laughed over cheap punch wasn't gone, but she was tired. Tired of waiting, tired of shrinking, tired of telling herself it would get better after this next deal. A week later, she filed for divorce. She didn't want money. She didn't want the house. She didn't want to fight. She wanted space, to breathe, to remember herself, to be loved in a way that didn't require begging. The process was civil but painful. Aaron tried to apologize, tried to convince her to stay, but timing is everything. By the time he started fighting for her, she felt like she had spent the last year fighting alone. She packed her clothes, her paint supplies, her wedding photo, and one blanket she had knitted the winter before. She closed the door, turned her back on marble floors and skyline views, and drove away. What she didn't realize, what neither of them realized, was that she carried something else with her. It started with fatigue, not emotional fatigue, physical. Her body felt heavy, her appetite strange, her emotions unpredictable. She chalked it up to stress until 2 missed cycles forced her to pay attention. She bought the test on a quiet Sunday morning. She stood in her friend's bathroom, hands shaking, heart pounding. When the line appeared, she sank to her knees and pressed a hand to her stomach as tears filled her eyes. She whispered, "Oh God, please give me strength." That night she lay awake, thinking about Aaron, not the businessman or the absentee partner, but the man who handed out compliments to her mother at family dinners, who danced with her in a kitchen, who made jokes about being scared of the registration table at that first gala. She typed his number into her phone, typed and deleted a message, dialed but didn't press call, put the phone down and picked it up again. What if I tell him and he comes back out of guilt? She whispered to herself. What if he takes them because his family wants control? What if he doesn't want them at all? The fear felt too big. Her heart felt too fragile. Her life felt too shaken, so she chose silence. 6 weeks later, at her first ultrasound appointment, the technician smiled and said, "Well, Mom, there are 2 babies here." Flora let out a laugh that turned into a sob. Twins. 2 of them. 2 little souls who didn't know their parents' history, who didn't know how complicated love could be. She pressed both hands to her stomach and whispered, "I promise I'll do right by you." From that moment forward, every choice she made revolved around Emma and Ryan. Every sacrifice felt worth it. Every hardship was softened by the thought of holding them. She spent her pregnancy working at the community center, painting during quiet mornings, and preparing for motherhood with a determination she didn't know she possessed. Her mother flew out to stay with her the last 2 months before delivery. When the twins were born, Flora cried harder than she ever had in her life. 2 wriggling babies placed against her chest. She whispered their names, Emma first, then Ryan, feeling each syllable land like a blessing. Life became messy and sweet and unpredictable. Nights blurred together. Days were filled with diaper changes, feedings, tiny socks, soft onesies, and burp cloths everywhere. But there was warmth in her small apartment. Laughter, noise, joy that didn't depend on bank accounts or calendars. She checked the news sometimes, saw articles about Aaron's business, photos from events. She wondered if he was happy. She wondered if he ever wondered about her. But she didn't reach out. She didn't think their paths would ever cross again. Life has a way of proving us wrong in the most unexpected places. Like a hallway in a modest Los Angeles apartment building, late at night, with a tired baby asleep on her shoulder. The day Aaron knocked on her door, she had no idea that everything she'd tried to protect might finally face the truth she'd run from. That knock was the beginning of a storm she didn't see coming. And yet, it was also the first step toward healing a story she thought was already over. For a few suspended seconds, Flora forgot how to breathe. The hallway light hit Aaron's face in a soft glow, and he looked different than the last time she'd seen him. Not older, just undone. His hair was slightly longer, his jaw was dusted with stubble, and his eyes, those unmistakable blue eyes, were filled with something she couldn't quite read. Shock, yes, confusion, but also something warmer buried under all of it, something she had spent more than a year trying not to think about. Emma shifted in her arms, tiny fingers curling in Flora's shirt. Her daughter's soft whimper broke the silence first. Aaron blinked, and his gaze dipped again to the child on Flora's hip, truly dipped this time, with focus and intent, not just passing surprise. His eyes widened by a fraction, as if something clicked in his mind. "Flora," he whispered, voice low, almost reverent. You have a baby." Flora tightened her hold on Emma so instinctively that her arm trembled. She angled her body just slightly, protecting Emma's view in her own heart. "Yes," she said quietly. "I do." Aaron swallowed. His throat bobbed visibly. I didn't know." 1,000 thoughts shot through Flora's mind. Of course he didn't know. She hadn't told him. Of course he would have questions. She wasn't ready to answer any. Of course this moment was the very thing she had feared since the day she learned she was pregnant. But none of that mattered right now, because he was still standing here, and she still had to breathe. "It's late," she said softly, trying to create distance with her tone even as her voice shook. "You should probably handle whatever's going on in your apartment." As if the universe wanted to mock her attempt at redirecting, the faint chirp of his smoke alarm rang out again through the wall. Aaron flinched, half laughing in embarrassment. "Right. The soup," he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "I really should, stop it from burning down my new place." For a tiny second, Flora felt the ghost of a smile tug at her cheek. He always had a way of being unintentionally clumsy in domestic situations, but she pushed the feeling away quickly. Aaron looked at her again, and there was so much unsaid hanging between them that Flora felt the air tighten. "You look," he started, then stopped, catching himself. His voice softened. "You look well, really well." Flora didn't know how to respond to that. She dipped her head slightly, acknowledging the words but not wanting to hold them. Compliments were complicated now. "Thank you," she replied quietly. Emma reached toward the crack in the door again, babbling something that sounded faintly like "hi," the same way she had the night before when she'd been startled awake. The sound hit Aaron like a physical touch. His whole expression softened, almost melting. "She's got a strong little voice," he said gently, offering Emma the smallest wave with his fingers. "Hey there, sweetheart." Flora's breath caught. He said it naturally, "sweetheart," without thinking, without knowing. She swallowed. "I should get her back to sleep." "Of course," he murmured. "I didn't mean to disturb you both." He paused. His eyes drifted between Flora and Emma, and for a heartbeat, he looked like he wanted to say something else. Something bigger, something dangerously close to the truth. Instead, he stepped back slowly. "I'm in the unit next door," he said, as if she hadn't already put that together. "If you need anything." There was a gentle sincerity in his tone, not a romantic one, not a pleading one, just a quiet honesty she remembered from the man who once handed her a jacket on a cold pier and said, "I want to keep you warm." She nodded. "Good night, Aaron." "Good night, Flora." She closed the door carefully, quietly, as though afraid even the soft click would shatter this fragile moment. When the latch slid into place, Flora leaned her back against the door, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Emma rested her tiny cheek on her mother's shoulder, thumb tucked into her mouth. Flora pressed her lips into her daughter's hair, inhaling the familiar baby scent, warm, milky, comforting. Her heart thudded against her ribs, still shaken. He was here, next door, not across the city, not in another world, next door. What were the odds? What were the chances that, of all the complexes in Los Angeles, he would move into hers? That on the very night she felt a rare moment of peace after a long day, his knock would bring her entire past back to life. Flora squeezed her eyes shut, trying not to panic. She'd been managing everything. The twins, work at the community center, bills, exhaustion, all while protecting her children from a world she didn't want them to get lost in. And now, their father was close enough to hear them cry through a shared wall. She wasn't ready. But life didn't care about readiness. Emma yawned deeply and rubbed her fist across her eyes. The sight grounded Flora. Whatever happened next, she had two innocent souls depending on her. She needed to be careful, clear, strong. "Let's get you to bed, baby girl," she whispered. She stood up, carrying Emma back to the crib where Ryan still slept peacefully, one little foot sticking out of the blanket in his usual stubborn fashion. She gently laid Emma down beside him, rubbing small circles on her back until her breathing slowed into sleep. But Flora couldn't sleep, not yet. She walked quietly to the living room and sat on the couch, her legs folded beneath her, staring at the wall they now shared with Aaron. Her ex-husband, her past, her heartbreak, the father of her children. The electricity between their apartments felt almost alive. She wondered if he was standing on the other side of the wall, thinking about her too, or maybe replaying the sight of the little girl in her arms. Flora buried her face in her hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she whispered. "Not like this." She needed space, time, a plan. She couldn't let emotions steer anything, not with the twins involved. After sitting for a long while, she finally lay down on the couch, pulling her blanket over her. Sleep tugged at her, heavy and reluctant. But just before drifting off, she heard something faint, muffled laughter from the apartment next door. Aaron's voice, soft, warm. A memory flashed, him laughing in their old kitchen, holding her waist as she stirred soup she didn't want him to taste until she fixed the seasoning. His chin resting on her shoulder, his arms around her, her chest tightened. Flora turned on her side, facing away from the wall, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter whether she wanted it or not. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure what the next morning would bring. The hallway light hummed softly, casting a warm glow over everything, but inside Flora's chest it felt like a lightning storm. Her hand was still wrapped around the door frame, steadying herself as she held Emma close with the other arm. After the long, exhausting day she'd had, she expected nothing but silence, maybe a late-night snack, or catching up on a few chores she'd put off. She never expected to open her door and see him, Aaron, her ex-husband, the man whose name she hadn't said out loud in more than a year. He stood there, breath slightly uneven as if he'd hurried down the hallway, shoulders rising and falling lightly under a plain black t-shirt. His hair was pushed back but not styled, longer than she remembered, giving him a softer, almost disarmed look. His eyes, those unmistakable blue eyes, landed on her face first. And in one instant, the shock on his features broke through every layer of composure he tried to hold. "Flora?" he said, barely audible. Hearing her name on his lips again felt strange, familiar, yet painful. Too many memories lived inside the way he said it. "Hello, Aaron," she answered, her voice gentle but steady. His gaze dropped for a second, noticing something he hadn't processed the first time, the small bundle in her arms. Emma shifted slightly, letting out a tiny sound. Aaron froze, eyes widening like he'd been hit with a truth he couldn't grasp yet. You have a baby," he breathed out, as though stating the obvious helped him understand it. Flora instinctively turned her body just a little, shielding Emma's face, a subtle motion but automatic, protective. Her instincts had sharpened during motherhood in ways she couldn't even explain. "She's fine," Flora said softly, brushing a thumb over Emma's hair, just startled, but Aaron didn't miss the way Flora angled herself. He noticed how tightly she held the child, how carefully she kept her daughter hidden from full view. He had a million questions burning behind his eyes, but none of them formed properly. Instead, he stammered, I didn't mean to bother you. I heard a noise. I thought something might fallen in your place." The way he rambled would have made her smile on another day. He was almost clumsy in his explanation, trying desperately not to look like a man who was unraveling inside. "I didn't know you lived here," he added. "I'm right next door. I just moved in tonight." Something in Flora sank. That made it real. Not temporary, not accidental. He lived next door. "I heard someone moving in," she managed. "Didn't think it would be you. Believe me," he said with a small, strained laugh. "I'm still trying to wrap my head around it." The way he stared, almost searching her face, made Flora feel like she was caught under a spotlight. She wasn't the same woman he last saw. She had grown tougher, softer, older, more tired, more fulfilled, and more afraid all at once. Emma blinked up at him, her pacifier bobbing lightly. She reached one tiny hand out toward the door, toward the man staring so intensely. Aaron's breath caught. "Hi there," he whispered, lifting his hand slowly, as though she were fragile. Emma giggled, a small bubbly sound, and tucked her face into Flora's shoulder. A pain hit Flora without warning, a pain made of longing, memories, and the jarring ache of what could have been. But she couldn't let herself fall into old softness. Not tonight, not with everything at risk. "It's late," she said quietly. "I should get her back to sleep." Aaron nodded quickly. "Of course, I didn't mean to." "I'm sorry. I'll get out of your way." He began to step back. Then the faint continued beeping from his apartment reached them. He winced. "The soup," he muttered. "Right. I should—" "Yeah." A small awkward laugh escaped him, and for a heartbeat they stood there again, facing each other. She with a child she'd protected fiercely, him with a question burning on his tongue but too afraid to ask. "Good night, Flora." "Good night, Aaron." She closed the door slowly, not slamming it, just quietly ending whatever that moment was trying to become. The latch clicked into place, but inside her heart didn't click so easily. Flora leaned her back against the door and slid down until her knees folded beneath her. She held Emma close, kissing the top of her head, and breathed deeply to keep her chest from tightening too much. Her world had just shifted. Not tomorrow, not next week. Tonight, Aaron, her past, her heartbreak, her children's father, was now close enough to hear her lullabies through the wall. She laid Emma down beside Ryan, who slept with his pacifier halfway out of his mouth. Flora tucked them both gently, smoothing their curls with a trembling hand. She pulled the baby monitor close and sank onto the couch. Her thoughts spun. He saw Emma, even if only for a second. He looked at her like, no, She pushed that thought away before it could finish. She wasn't ready. Everything could fall apart if she wasn't careful. Across the wall, Aaron was living an entirely different storm. He had rushed back into his apartment, turned off the burner, opened windows, waved away steam. Yet he barely registered any of it. He was replaying the moment at her door, the baby, the way Flora looked, the timeline he knew too well. Flora had 2 babies, actually. He heard her mention it through the crack. Twins. And he didn't know. He should have known. He should have been there. He felt the ache tightening in his chest as he thought about the final weeks of their marriage, the arguments, the distance. He remembered that night she stood in their doorway wearing the green dress, her eyes shimmering with hurt he didn't understand then. His guilt hit him like a wave. At some point in the early morning he grabbed his phone. He typed her name in his search bar, not on social media, but in his own photos. Pictures of them smiling, dancing, laughing, standing beside each other in a world they tried and failed to build. Then he opened the one social app where her profile wasn't fully locked. And there they were, bright eyes, matching curls, a hospital photo dated 14 months ago, a birthday video with 2 babies trying to blow out 1 candle. 2 smiles. Aaron stared until tears blurred the screen. The timeline matched. He wiped his face and let out a sound that was part exhale, part heartbreak. How could he not have known? How did she carry all of that alone? He wanted to call someone, anyone, but there was no one he trusted with this. Not his parents, certainly not his mother, and not his colleagues. So he sat alone, pressing his thumb over the image of the tiny twins in the kiddie pool, Ryan and Emma. His mind didn't know their names yet, but his heart did. He stayed awake until dawn. Family. Let me ask you something real. If you were in Flora's shoes, would you tell your ex the truth right away? Or would you keep quiet until you felt safe? Let me know in the comments, because this next chapter of their lives is about to get complicated. Flora was exhausted when morning arrived. She had slept in scattered minutes, not even full hours, and even those minutes were heavy with dreams she didn't want to examine. Ryan was up first, standing in the crib and babbling loudly enough to wake Emma. Flora scooped them both up, kissed their cheeks, and began the daily routine she'd perfected: diaper changes, warming bottles, oatmeal with mashed banana. But her mind felt like it was stuck in the hallway from last night. At 9:02 a.m., a soft knock came at the door, a familiar knock. Flora froze. Ryan squealed at the sound, kicking his feet impatiently. He was halfway strapped into the stroller, trying to wiggle out. Emma clapped her hands. Flora braced herself and opened the door. Aaron stood there holding 2 cups of coffee, hair neatly brushed, wearing a clean white button-down with rolled-up sleeves. He looked hopeful and terrified. "Morning," he said, voice gentle. "Morning," she replied, guarded. I brought this for you, caramel latte, from the cafe down the block. I remember you liked them." He remembered. She hated that her chest warmed at that fact. "Thank you," she said, stepping aside just enough to accept the cup. Before she could take a sip, Ryan decided he had no interest in letting the morning stay uneventful. With absolutely no warning, the toddler lunged out of her arm and into Aaron's, like he knew him. Aaron's reflexes kicked in. He dropped the second cup on the small entry table and caught Ryan with both arms. "Oh, hey, little guy, careful." He laughed softly, securing him. Ryan giggled and instantly grabbed Aaron's shirt, fascinated by the buttons. Flora's mouth fell open. "Ryan, you can't just—" But the boy wasn't letting go, and Aaron looked at him like he'd found treasure. The child's eye color, bright hazel blue, hit Aaron like a punch to the chest. His throat tightened. He whispered, "Hi, buddy." Ryan pressed his forehead to Aaron's jaw. Emma watched from Flora's hip, cautious but curious, her small eyebrow raised the same way Flora's used to when she was amused. Aaron saw that too. Every detail pulled him closer to the truth he already knew deep inside. Flora stood there, heart pounding, knowing she couldn't hide much longer. This was only the morning, and the truth was already pushing at the edges of their lives. For a long moment, Flora didn't know what to do with the sight in front of her. Aaron standing in her doorway, holding Ryan like it was the most natural thing in the world. Ryan babbled loudly, as if announcing to the whole apartment complex that he had made a new discovery, his small fingers gripping Aaron's shirt with complete confidence. Aaron looked stunned. but not in a bad way. More like a man trying to understand an emotion he hadn't expected to feel so instantly. "This little guy has some courage," he said softly, his voice warm but slightly shaky. "He literally jumped into my arms. He does that sometimes," Flora murmured, though she'd never seen Ryan do it with a stranger a day in his life. But Aaron wasn't a stranger, not to them, not genetically, not in ways Flora had spent months trying not to think about. Emma eyed both men suspiciously, clinging to Flora's shirt and chewing on the ear of her stuffed rabbit. Her serious little stare made Flora chuckle quietly. Emma took her time warming up to people. She studied them first, thought about it, analyzed them. She was careful, just like Flora. Ryan, in contrast, was bold, like he had inherited some adventurous fire she always wondered if she or Aaron carried more of. Aaron shifted his grip on the toddler gently. "He's heavier than he looks," he said with a small smile. "He likes snacks," Flora said. Ryan responded by patting Aaron's cheek with a drool-covered hand. Aaron froze as if the small touch rearranged something inside him. Then slowly, a laugh escaped him. Soft, disbelieving, emotional in a way Flora hadn't heard in a long time. Flora cleared her throat. "Well, thank you for the latte," she said, lifting the cup slightly. "We were about to go get the mail." A flicker of disappointment crossed Aaron's face before he masked it. "Oh, I can let you get to it then." He made a move to hand Ryan back. Ryan immediately protested, grabbing Aaron's collar and whining loudly in refusal. Flora blinked. "Ryan, sweetie, you can't." But Aaron shook his head gently, bouncing the toddler just a bit. "It's okay, he's all right with me." The implication hung there, heavy and unspoken. "He didn't say the script that would have destroyed her. He acts like he knows me. He didn't say the truth that sat on the edge of everything. I think I know why. Instead, he simply said, 'Can I come with you? Just the walk to the mailbox?'" Flora hesitated, chewing her lip. She should have said no. She should have protected herself. She should have created space. But then Emma stretched out her tiny hand toward Aaron, still unsure, but open. And Flora's heart weakened. "Okay," she murmured. A short walk. They stepped outside into the crisp mid-morning air. The sun lit up the row of apartment buildings, casting a soft brightness on the walkway. Flora maneuvered the stroller carefully while Aaron walked beside her. Ryan perched comfortably on his hip like he'd belonged there for months instead of minutes. It was peaceful, almost unsettlingly so. "Do you like this complex?" Aaron asked. His tone was casual, but she could hear the careful attempt to sound normal. "It's good," Flora said. "Quiet, safe, close to work, and the twins like it?" She swallowed. "Yes." The word felt thick. "They have space to play. And the neighbors are friendly." He nodded thoughtfully. "I like it too. More real than the places I've lived." That made her glance at him. "Real?" He shrugged. "Less pressure. Less pretending everything's perfect." She looked straight ahead. "Perfection isn't real anyway. You always knew that better than I did." His voice held a gentle regret. "I didn't back then." Flora pushed the stroller faster, feeling the conversation was slipping into dangerous territory. "Let's get the mail." At the mailbox cluster, Ryan grabbed at the keys hanging from Flora's wrist, giggling when they jingled. Emma leaned over the edge of the stroller to watch him, yawning dramatically. Aaron's eyes softened. "She looks like you when she does that. That little half-yawn, half-pout." Flora felt heat climb her neck. "She does?" "Yeah." His smile was small. "Exactly like you." She avoided his gaze, pretending to sort envelopes. Too intimate. Too soon. They could have ended the outing there, but something, maybe curiosity, maybe longing, maybe the slight breeze carrying the scent of fresh-cut grass, made Flora say quietly, "Do you want to take a walk around the block?" Aaron blinked in surprise. "With you? And yes," she cut in before she could stop herself. "If you want..." "I'd like that," he replied quickly, too quickly. So they walked, slowly, carefully, each step building a thin bridge between a painful past and an uncertain future. It shouldn't have felt easy, but somehow it did. They talked in a rhythm almost too natural, like two people who remembered the melody but had forgotten some of the words. "So the new project," Flora said as she pushed the stroller, "is it a big one?" Aaron nodded. "It's a redevelopment site. Old warehouse. I'm trying to convert part of it into mixed-use local shops, maybe a community area. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Really? A community area? He smiled a little. I know. It surprised me too. But I think it's needed. This neighborhood has families, small businesses, artists. Thought it could be good for everyone. She looked at him sideways. When did you start caring about community spaces? He hesitated. Honestly, maybe the day I realized how much you love them, and how much I didn't respect that enough. Flora swallowed hard. Aaron, he held up a hand, not touching her, but asking her silently to let him say this without shutting him down. You made me see value in things I never looked at twice, he said. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Before she could respond, Ryan threw a cereal puff at Aaron's face. Aaron blinked. Flora stifled a laugh. He does that when he likes someone. Aaron gently wiped the puff off his cheek, smiling. Then I guess I'm honored, Emma squawked indignantly, wanting attention too. Aaron leaned toward her with a silly face, crossing his eyes until she laughed. Her tiny giggle made his entire expression melt. You're good with them, Flora murmured before she could stop herself. He looked up, startled by the compliment. I'm trying, he said, almost shy. I want to be. They walked for several more minutes, sharing stories, not deep ones, just gentle ones. She told him about her art class at the community center. He told her about learning to troubleshoot his own garbage disposal for the first time in his life. She laughed, imagining him kneeling under a sink, watching tutorials on his phone. Then came the funniest moment of the outing. They passed a small crack in the sidewalk. Aaron wasn't watching his feet. He was too busy making Emma laugh. His toe caught the crack, and he stumbled forward, letting out an undignified whoa. Flora gasped. Ryan squealed with delight. Aaron caught himself just before he face-planted into a patch of daisies. Flora burst into laughter. She couldn't stop. Her eyes watered. Oh my God, she wheezed. Are you okay? Aaron stood up, dusting off his jeans with exaggerated dignity. I meant to do that. It was a demonstration. Of what? How not to walk. She laughed harder. His grin widened. For a moment, a small, fragile moment, they were just two people laughing together like they used to. No past, no secrets, just them. When they returned to her apartment, something shifted in the air. It wasn't heavy. It wasn't tense. It was something else, something gentler. They stepped inside, and Ryan finally allowed himself to be handed back to Flora. Emma reached out for her mother too, still wary but clearly intrigued by this tall man who made silly faces. As Flora set the twins down with their toys, Aaron glanced around the living room and froze. His eye fell on a framed photo on the shelf, their wedding photo. Flora's breath hitched. She had meant to put that away months ago but never had the heart. Aaron stepped closer, not touching it, just looking. His expression didn't turn smug or nostalgic or accusatory. He simply looked, moved. You kept this, he said quietly. She swallowed. I didn't want to erase everything. He nodded slowly. Neither did I. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It felt full, like there were words floating in the air that neither of them dared speak yet. Flora turned away, her heart beating too hard. Do you want something to drink? She asked quickly. But before he could answer, Ryan clambered onto Aaron's shoe, using it as leverage to try standing. Aaron gasped softly and looked down like he'd been blessed. He likes you, Flora said, trying to sound casual. I like him too, Aaron whispered, too emotional to hide it. Emma crawled over next, eyeing him like she was assessing if he was worthy of attention. Then she smacked his knee with her toy block. She likes you too, Flora said, laughing under her breath. Aaron laughed, rubbing his knee where she'd smacked him. I'll take it. And in the midst of this gentle chaos, tiny hands patting, toys clattering, laughter spilling, the line between them blurred. Just slightly. Not fully, not yet, but enough that you could feel something shifting, enough that you could see the beginning of something new forming in the space between them. Just almost a family, not quite, but closer than yesterday, and tomorrow would bring even more closeness they weren't ready for, especially at the park, where the truth would come running, literally, toward them. The weekend arrived with a rare softness in the Los Angeles air, warm but not heavy, breezy without being chilly. It was the kind of morning that made even exhausted parents feel like stepping outside wasn't a chore but a gift. Flora had just finished packing the twins' snack bag, slipping in crackers, fruit slices, and their favorite sippy cups. She grabbed a lightweight blanket and set it by the stroller. The weekly park trip was something she looked forward to, even on the days when she barely slept. It was a chance to breathe fresh air, watch the twins explore grass and sunshine, and feel grounded. This time, though, the anticipation came with a nervous flutter, because Aaron would be joining them. Just a week ago, she wouldn't have imagined inviting him to tag along. Now it happened so naturally she didn't even remember saying the words out loud. She strapped Emma into the stroller first. Her daughter squealed happily and clapped her hands. Ryan toddled over, holding his toy truck and humming in that sweet gibberish way that only toddlers could. Flora bent down and kissed his cheek before settling him in next to his sister. "Ready?" she asked, mostly to herself. A knock on the door answered for her. Aaron stood on the other side wearing light jeans, a navy t-shirt, and that hopeful but careful expression he'd been using all week, the look of a man trying not to overstep but wanting so badly to be present. He carried a small canvas bag slung over his shoulder. Flora raised a brow. "You brought supplies?" He laughed quietly. "Snacks, water, a change of clothes in case the twins make a mess. Or I make a mess." She couldn't help smiling. Good thinking. He leaned down to greet the twins. "Morning, cuties." Emma gave him her usual cautious stare, then slowly extended her hand. He tapped her fingers gently. Ryan lifted his truck toward him proudly. "For me?" Aaron asked. Ryan shook his head fiercely. "No, sir." The truck was not leaving his possession, then shoved it back into his lap, babbling as if explaining the entire plot of an action movie. Flora laughed softly. "He likes showing off." "I'm honored," Aaron said. "Truly." They headed down the walkway together, Flora pushing the stroller while Aaron walked beside her, matching his pace with hers. A few neighbors glanced their way. Some greeted Flora with a warm smile. Others looked curiously at the man walking so closely beside her. She ignored the looks. She didn't owe anyone an explanation. The park was only a 10-minute walk away, nestled between tall trees and winding paths. Sun filtered through the leaves, scattering faint patterns on the paved walkway. Birds chirped overhead, and the sound of distant laughter reached them as other families enjoyed their Saturday. When they reached their usual spot under the wide oak tree, Flora spread out the blanket. The twins immediately reached for the toys Aaron pulled from his bag, soft blocks, a ball with little stars printed on it, and a crinkly book that made both of them squeal in excitement. "You came prepared," she said, a mix of surprise and appreciation. "I watched a few videos online about what to bring to the park with toddlers," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "The internet's a wild place, but helpful." "That explains the bag," she teased. He grinned. "Yeah, I didn't want to show up completely clueless." Flora lowered herself onto the blanket while Aaron sat beside her, close enough to offer help but far enough not to crowd her. Ryan crawled straight into Aaron's lap. Emma sat gracefully, adjusting her bow like she was preparing for a photo shoot. Watching Aaron handle them came with both comfort and fear. Fear, because that feeling was dangerous. But today wasn't a day for conflict, not yet. Soon the park became their little world. Aaron helped Ryan try the slide for the first time, holding his hands and cheering when he landed safely at the bottom with a surprised laugh. Emma clapped enthusiastically from the top, then scooted into Aaron's arms for her turn. "Ready, princess?" Aaron asked tenderly. Emma studied him, then gave a shy nod. Flora watched, her heart twisting and settling all at once. Seeing him with their children, her children, felt like watching puzzle pieces she had hidden in a drawer finally click into place. She tried not to show how deeply it affected her. After playtime, they wandered toward the duck pond. Flora held Emma while Aaron carried Ryan on his shoulders. The twins pointed at the ducks gliding over the water, squealing when one quacked loudly. Aaron took out a few small crumbs from a baggie and handed them to Ryan. "Gentle toss," he instructed. Ryan's idea of gentle was more enthusiastic than controlled, but the ducks didn't mind. They gathered quickly. Flora laughed. "Careful, little guy. You're feeding them like they owe you rent." Aaron chuckled. "He's got leadership qualities." She rolled her eyes playfully. You would say that it was easy, so easy it terrified her. The conversations, the teamwork, the shared laughter, it all felt too natural, like a family. Almost, but not quite. Not yet. After feeding the ducks, they returned to the blanket for snacks. Aaron poured lemonade into small cups, and Flora passed out cereal puffs and fruit slices. The twins munched happily, occasionally shoving food into each other's mouths with dramatic generosity. Teamwork, Aaron said, smiling. Somewhat, Flora replied. Sometimes they fight like cartoon characters. They talked about safe topics again, her classes at the community center, his new project, funny stories from their separate lives. But every so often, Flora caught him stealing glances at the twins with a look that broke her heart. A longing he didn't even try to hide. He thought he was being subtle. He wasn't. Finally, the twins toddled away toward a bright red ball another child had left near the grass. Ryan was the first to grab it, giggling loudly as he tossed it toward the gate. Flora turned for just a moment to put away wrappers, a moment too long. The ball bounced once, twice, then rolled through the open park gate onto the sidewalk. Ryan, fearless and fast, chased it without hesitation. The world slowed. Ryan! Flora gasped, scrambling to her feet. He didn't hear her. He toddled straight after the ball, closer to the curb. Aaron moved in an instant. His face shifted, determined, focused, protective. He sprinted across the grass, leaping over the small wooden border like it wasn't even there. A delivery van turned the corner at the same time. Flora's heart dropped into her stomach. Ryan! She screamed, voice cracking. Aaron reached him first. He scooped Ryan up with both arms and stepped back onto the grass just as the van slowed in confusion. Everything went silent except Flora's pounding heartbeat. Ryan, startled, clung to Aaron's shirt and burst into tears. Aaron held him close, whispering, You're okay, I got you, I promise, buddy, I got you. Flora reached them breathlessly, nearly collapsing as she wrapped her arms around both of them, Aaron and Ryan, her hands trembling uncontrollably. Oh my God, she choked out. Ryan, baby, you scared me. Her voice broke. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Ryan whimpered, squeezing both adults desperately. Aaron wrapped one arm around Flora, pulling her close. His voice was soft, shaken. He's safe. I swear. He's okay. Flora didn't pull away this time. She pressed her forehead against Ryan's and Aaron's shoulder, sobbing from relief and terror all at once. The moment lasted long enough for every suppressed truth in her heart to crack wide open. When she finally pulled back, wiping her face with trembling fingers, she saw something in Aaron's eyes she hadn't been ready to face. Fear, love, protectiveness, recognition. He stared at Ryan, really stared, and then looked at Emma, who was toddling toward them nervously, his breath caught. Flora, his voice shook. I need to ask you something. Her heart dropped. This moment, the one she'd run from for more than a year, had arrived. Those babies, he said softly, voice trembling. Emma and Ryan, are they... He swallowed hard. Are they mine? The world around them seemed to pause. The distant laughter of children, the dog barking near the playground, the breeze brushing leaves, it all faded. Flora's lips quivered. She had carried the truth alone, protected it, hid it, feared it. The near accident stripped every layer away. She couldn't lie. Not now. Not after this. Her voice cracked as she finally whispered, Yes. Aaron closed his eyes, a tear slipping down his cheek. There are children, Flora continued, her voice breaking further. I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't know how to tell you. Aaron's knees nearly buckled. He pulled Ryan tighter, pulled Flora closer, and let out a sound that was part heartbreak, part relief. My God, he whispered. Flora. She didn't know whether to hold him or recoil. Instead, she did what felt natural. She reached for Emma, pulling both twins close while Aaron wrapped one arm around all three of them. A raw, stunned, silent embrace. Nothing romantic, nothing strategic, just truth, pure, unavoidable truth. The walk home was quiet. Ryan sucked his thumb in Flora's arms. Emma curled into her chest. Aaron carried the stroller with one hand and held the diaper bag with the other, glancing at the twins every few seconds like he still couldn't believe they were real. They returned to the apartment without a word. Everything around them looked the same as it had an hour ago, but everything inside them had changed forever. The apartment was quiet in that heavy, stretched way that happens after an emotional storm. Flora pushed open the door gently, shifting Emma's sleepy weight against her shoulder while Aaron carried Ryan, who was already dozing. Neither of them spoke as they stepped inside. The silence wasn't awkward. It was thick with meaning, charged with everything they had just lived through at the park. A truth buried for more than a year had finally surfaced, and now there was no going back. The living room still smelled faintly of baby lotion and the lavender spray Flora used after cleaning up earlier. Toys were scattered across the rug, a soft rattle shaped like a star, a little drum Ryan liked to bang, and Emma's favorite rabbit with the fraying ears. The familiarity of home clashed with the rawness in their hearts. It felt surreal that just an hour ago, Aaron didn't know for certain that Emma and Ryan were his. And now the knowledge lived in the air like a new heartbeat. Flora crossed quietly to the crib nook and laid Emma down, brushing curls from her forehead. Ryan stirred lightly in Aaron's arms, letting out a soft sigh as if he recognized being safe. Aaron placed him next to his sister, making sure the stuffed rabbit was within reach. The twins, exhausted from the outing and the near scare, slipped fully into sleep within seconds. For a moment, both parents lingered there, standing side by side, watching the two tiny humans breathing in perfect rhythm. Their twins, the children who carried both their smiles, both their temperaments, both their hearts. Flora's throat tightened. Aaron inhaled slowly, like a man trying to memorize the sight before him. "They're perfect," he whispered, voice cracking. Flora swallowed. "They are—" He lifted a trembling hand and let it hover above Ryan's little back, not quite touching, as if he was afraid he'd wake him. Or maybe afraid the moment would vanish. Flora stepped back, letting him have that space. After a long, quiet minute, she gently tugged his sleeve, leading him out so their voices wouldn't disturb the babies. They moved into the living room. The door to the nursery nook stayed cracked open, the soft hum of the white noise machine filling the silence. Flora sat down slowly on the couch. Aaron remained standing for a moment, staring blankly, as if his mind was running through a reel of every moment he had missed. He finally whispered, "I miss so much." Flora looked up at him, her chest tightening. She opened her mouth to respond, but Aaron sank onto the other end of the couch before she could speak, running both hands through his hair. "I missed everything," he said again, voice low and heavy. Their birth, their first breath, their first laugh, their first teeth, their first steps, their first words. His voice broke on the last phrase. "I didn't even know they existed." Flora felt tears burning behind her eyes. She had known this moment would be painful. She just hadn't imagined how much. "Aaron," she whispered. His eyes lifted to hers. They looked different than she remembered. Still blue, still striking, but filled with something deeper than panic or shock. Grief, regret, a silent plea for understanding. "I should have been there," he said, not as anger but as a confession. "I should have known. I should have, I don't know, done something differently, been someone different, more present, more aware, more—" His breath trembled. "More your husband." Flora's eyes softened, but her heart ached. She leaned back slightly and folded her hands. "Aaron, it wasn't that simple. It feels simple right now," he countered quietly. "I worked too much. I left you alone too much. I let you feel unseen. I let my family's expectations, my mother's opinions, make you doubt your place in my life." He shook his head harder, pained. "I didn't defend you enough. I didn't show up enough. I didn't choose us enough." Flora breathed in slowly, grounding herself before responding. "You weren't a bad person, but you were absent. I was alone in that big house almost every night. I tried to tell you, Aaron, I really did, and I know you had responsibilities, but I had needs. Emotional needs, connection, partnership." He nodded, eyes down. "I didn't leave because I stopped loving you," Flora continued softly. "I left because I felt invisible. And when I found out I was pregnant, everything was too heavy, too painful, too confusing. I didn't know how to reach out without feeling like I was begging to be prioritized." Aaron's jaw clenched. She continued, voice shaking. "Your mother made it clear she didn't think I belonged in your world. She never said it plainly, but she didn't need to. Her looks, her comments, the way she talked over me. It all told me I wasn't the wife she wanted you to have. Aaron's face twisted. I should have shut that down. Every single time, Flora's eyes watered, and then there was your world, your circles, the investors, the high society events. I felt so out of place, Aaron, like I was constantly trying to shrink myself to fit into a frame that wasn't built for me. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his voice low. I did that. I made you feel small. I didn't protect you the way I promised. I didn't prioritize the right things. She shook her head gently. Aaron, I'm not saying this to blame you. I'm saying it because this... She gestured between them. This is why I didn't tell you. I was scared. Scared you'd resent me. Scared your family would try to take control. Scared that if you came back into the picture, it wouldn't be because you wanted me, but because you felt obligated to the babies. A tear slid down Aaron's cheek. But they're mine, Flora. I had a right to know. She looked down, guilt twisting inside her. I know, and I'm sorry. Every day, I wondered if I made the right choice. Every night I held them and asked myself if keeping you in the dark was protecting them, or punishing you, or punishing myself. Aaron moved slowly, inching toward her but still left respectful distance. I'm angry. I won't pretend I'm not, but underneath that, I understand why you felt the way you did. Flora swallowed. He continued, a voice soft but certain, but I'm angry at myself too. I created a marriage where you didn't feel safe coming to me with the biggest news of your life. He met her gaze. That's on me. Flora's eyes blurred with tears. Aaron wiped his face roughly. But Flora, I want to do better now. Not out of guilt, not out of obligation, but because they're mine, and because I care about you. Still. She exhaled shakily. I don't know what this looks like moving forward. We'll figure it out, he said. We don't need lawyers. We don't need courtrooms. We don't even need labels yet. We just need a plan. A first step. What kind of first step? She asked cautiously. Aaron inhaled. Let me be here. Consistently. Let me be a presence. Let me learn how to care for them. Let me help you. Not as daddy right away. Not imposing or demanding. His voice gentled. Let me earn it. Flora felt something inside her soften, but fear lingered. Aaron, I don't want the twins confused. They're still so little. They don't understand titles. They don't know the history. They just know who's around and who isn't. He nodded. Exactly. So let me be around. Structured time. Gentle time. No pressure. He hesitated. We can start small. Morning visits. Walks. Playtime. I don't want to disrupt their sense of security. I only want to build it. Flora looked down at her hands, rubbing her thumb over her palm slowly. We'll have to communicate clearly. No assumptions. No letting old patterns repeat. No old patterns, Aaron repeated firmly. Not again. Flora nodded. And no big family announcements yet, especially not to your mother. I need time before that. We need time. Aaron's mouth tightened at the mention of his mother, but he nodded again. We'll move at your pace. Silence settled once more, but it wasn't sharp. It was thoughtful, cautious, almost hopeful. Finally, Flora whispered, Okay, we'll start slow co-parenting. Aaron's eyes softened, relief washing through him. Thank you, Flora. I promise you, I am not going anywhere. She didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned back into the couch cushions, letting out a long breath she felt like she'd been holding for over a year. Aaron stayed quiet, giving her space. In the background, Emma let out a faint whimper before settling again, the small sound reminding them both why this mattered so deeply. 2 little lives were sleeping in the next room. 2 little lives who had no idea that their world had shifted today. Flora lifted her gaze one more time. We'll start tomorrow. Aaron nodded with quiet conviction. Tomorrow, and every day after. And for the first time in a long time, the room felt like a place where healing could begin. Morning light slipped softly through the curtains, landing in warm stripes across the living room rug, where toys were already scattered from the twins' early play. Flora had been up since dawn. No surprise there, motherhood didn't care about emotional nights or life-changing conversations. Emma and Ryan woke when they woke, and the new day didn't pause for anyone to catch their breath. She was kneeling on the floor assembling a small snack tray when a gentle knock sounded, not hurried, not loud, just enough to say, I'm here, but only if you want me to be." Flora wiped her hands on a dish towel and exhaled. "So it begins. Their new chapter." She opened the door cautiously, but not with the same dread she'd felt days ago. There stood Aaron, dressed casually in a soft gray t-shirt and jeans, holding a small brown paper bag in one hand and wearing an expression that was equal parts hopeful and nervous. "Good morning," he said, voice warm. Flora nodded. "Morning." He held up the paper bag. "I brought muffins, and the little one's favorite crackers. I wasn't sure if this was too much." "It's fine," she replied, stepping back to allow him in. "Come on." As Aaron entered, the twins froze mid-play, like little meerkats recognizing something interesting. Emma blinked twice, then grinned, lifting both arms in the air like she was presenting herself for pickup. Ryan simply squealed and crawled full speed toward Aaron's legs. Aaron laughed under his breath, overwhelmed by the instant welcome. He dropped into a crouch, letting the bag rest beside him. "Hey there," he greeted gently, offering a hand to each child. "You two are in good spirits today." Ryan grabbed his fingers immediately, wobbling onto his feet with determination. Emma tugged insistently at Aaron's sleeve, demanding equal attention. Flora folded her arms lightly, watching with cautious amusement. "They're always energetic after breakfast. Then I'm right on time," he said. Emma tugged again. Flora sighed with a faint smile. "She wants you to pick her up." Aaron hesitated only a second before lifting the toddler into his arms. She settled happily against his chest, as if she'd done it her whole life. Ryan, not to be outdone, grabbed onto Aaron's shin like a determined barnacle. "I think he wants up too," Flora said, noticing Ryan's repeated attempts. Aaron's eyes widened. "Both of them at once?" "You're tall," Flora teased. "You'll manage." And with a careful shift of weight, he did. Emma perched on one arm, Ryan balanced on the other. The babies shrieked with delighted giggles. Aaron looked like he had just discovered a missing part of himself. Flora's heart clenched. They sat on the floor together, Emma crawling into her mother's lap while Ryan maintained a death grip on Aaron's shirt. Flora passed a container of soft fruit pieces to the twins. Aaron reached for a wipe and attempted, to clean Ryan's sticky mouth. The wipe tore immediately. Flora covered a snort with her hand. "You have to unfold it first." "Right," Aaron murmured, trying again. He opened the wipe, but Ryan wriggled like a small dolphin escaping a net, smearing strawberry across Aaron's shirt. Flora's lips twitched. "Welcome to real parenting. I think I underestimated the athleticism," Aaron said, staring at the strawberry smear. Emma then stuck a piece of fruit directly into his hair. Aaron froze. "Is this part of the process too?" "Yep," Flora said, deadpan. He laughed, shaking his head but not removing the fruit immediately. Instead, he leaned closer to Emma, who poked his cheek with a sticky finger. He pretended to fall backward dramatically, making her squeal again. Flora sat quietly, taking it in. She couldn't deny it. He was natural. Unpolished, clumsy, but natural. After snack time, she decided to test him further. "Want to try changing a diaper?" Aaron blinked. "I feel like that's a trick question." "It's not," she said, picking up Ryan. "You said you wanted to learn. This is part of learning." He stiffened only slightly, then nodded. "Okay, let's do it." In the nursery nook, Flora laid out a clean diaper, wipes and cream. She stepped aside. Aaron approached like a man defusing a bomb. Flora bit back a grin. He removed the old diaper, his eyebrows knitting together. "There's no manual for this?" "Nope. Just instincts. As you can see," he said wryly. "Mine need tuning." Ryan kicked his feet, squealing at the cold wipe. Aaron fumbled but stayed patient, following Flora's quiet pointers. The diaper ended up too loose. Flora gave him a look. He sighed. "Redo. Yes. Unless you want a disaster, redo it is." After the third attempt, the diaper finally looked respectable. Aaron threw his arms up. "Success." Ryan immediately rolled over and crawled away, pants still missing. Flora laughed. "You celebrate when the pants are on." Aaron chased Ryan gently, scooped him up, slipped the pants on, and lifted him triumphantly. "Now it's success," Flora said with a nod. Over the next hour, chaos and comedy intertwined. They tried giving the twins new toys, expensive, perfectly crafted wooden items Aaron had bought last minute, but the babies ignored them completely. Instead, they banged on pots and pans Flora set on the floor, clanging happily like a toddler orchestra. Aaron stared blankly. I spent a ridiculous amount of money for that giant box to arrive this morning. Flora shrugged. Kids like noise, not aesthetics. He pointed at the pots. So these are better to them? Absolutely. He sat on the rug, stunned, watching Emma hit a pan lid like a miniature drummer. They're incredible, he whispered. Flora softened. They are. When the twins finally drifted into their midday nap, the apartment quieted. Flora sat at the kitchen table, wrapping her chilled hands around a mug of tea. Aaron joined her, wiping a smudge of carrot puree from his forearm. That went better than I expected, he said. You did well, really. You didn't break anything, or anyone. He let out a breathy laugh. I'll take that as high praise. The laughter faded into a quieter, more serious tone. Aaron leaned forward, hands clasped loosely. I want to talk about real things too, not just diapers and baby food. Flora braced subtly. Okay, he took a slow breath. They're going to need stable routines, clear decisions, doctor visits, schedules, all of it. I want to be involved. I expected you would, Flora replied carefully. And I know I can't just barge in and declare anything. I know I need to earn trust. Your trust. Their trust. His voice grew soft. I'm okay with that. Flora nodded slowly. But the real question, Aaron continued gently, is how we set this up without overwhelming them. Or you. She rubbed her thumb along her mug. We'd have to decide things together. Communicate. Make choices as a unit. Aaron agreed. Absolutely. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Financially, he said slowly, I don't want you carrying everything alone, not after doing it solo for more than a year. I want to contribute, substantially, consistently. Flora lifted her eyes. Aaron, I'm not going to let money buy your place in their lives. That's not what I'm trying to do, he said firmly. I want to support my children. That's my responsibility. Her expression softened. I know, but I need you to understand. When it comes to raising them, presence matters more than money ever will. He nodded. I hear you. Silence settled briefly. A gentler silence this time. Then Aaron exhaled. I want to start with something small, daily time with them, an hour or two, helping with meals, helping with bath time, going on walks with you, showing up consistently. Flora considered this. That's reasonable. He smiled gratefully. Thank you. Flora rested her arms on the table, feeling the beginnings of a partnership forming. Not romantic, not yet, but practical. Mature, needed. A soft cry suddenly crackled through the baby monitor. Aaron's head snapped toward the sound instinctively. That's Emma, Flora said. Aaron stood immediately. Let me try. She blinked. You want to go alone? If that's okay? She nodded. Go. He slipped into the nursery nook with quiet footsteps. Flora stayed at the table, listening. She could hear him whisper, soothingly, could hear the gentle rustling of him lifting her. After a minute, he came out holding Emma against his shoulder, her little hand loosely gripping his shirt. I think she's just sleepy and wanted company, he murmured. Emma yawned loudly, then laid her head back down. He rocked her gently, looking at her with awe. Flora saw it, that look, the look of a man falling in love with fatherhood fast and without hesitation. It was almost too much for her heart. Later that evening, when both twins were finally down and the apartment had quieted again, Flora and Aaron found themselves sitting on the couch, this time without the emotional chaos of Part 7. It was calm, almost peaceful. Aaron leaned back slightly. Flora, I know we're focusing on the kids right now, but can I ask you something? She looked at him cautiously. Depends on what it is. Do you ever think about us? Not now, but before all this? Flora sighed softly, looking at her hands. Of course I thought about us. Every day in some way. He nodded. Same here. But right now, she added gently, we have to focus on co-parenting. Emotions can get messy, and if we confuse the twins or confuse ourselves, it could make everything harder. Aaron accepted that with a quiet nod. Then he said softly, I'd like to earn my way back into their lives. And maybe, one day, earn my way back into yours. But I won't rush anything. Flora's heart thumped, but she didn't answer. Instead, she whispered, we'll take it one day at a time. He smiled at that, One day at a time, the moment lingered, warm, cautious, hopeful, but they didn't cross into romance yet. Not tonight. Tonight was about learning, adjusting, doing better. Before they parted for the evening, Flora stood and walked toward the hallway. Aaron followed quietly. She turned just enough to meet his eyes. "Good night, Aaron. Good night, Flora." As she closed her bedroom door, she could hear him settling onto the couch, choosing to stay close but respectful of her space. She leaned against her doorframe, hand on her chest. He was trying, and that mattered more than she'd expected. The apartment was quiet after a long day of learning, adjusting, and emotional recalibration. Flora stood in the hallway for a moment after closing her bedroom door, listening to the soft rustles of Aaron unfolding the spare blanket on the couch. It struck her how bizarrely normal it felt, and yet nothing about the day had been normal at all. The twins had settled easily tonight, soothed by the unexpected rhythm of having both their parents near. Emma had curled instantly into Flora's shoulder during the final lullaby, while Ryan had rolled onto his back, clutching the stuffed bear Aaron had bought earlier in the week, a bear Flora had been wary about at first but slowly warmed to, as she saw how much comfort it brought Ryan. Flora leaned her forehead against the wall and exhaled. One day at a time. That's what she told Aaron, and that's what she needed to remind herself too. In the living room, Aaron let out a tired breath as he lowered himself onto the couch. His muscles ached from a day spent chasing two toddlers, crawling across the floor and kneeling over diaper-changing pads. His shirt had 3 stains, 2 from fruit, 1 from sweet potato, but he hadn't bothered to change. His mind was too full. He ran a hand through his hair and looked around the dim apartment lit only by a lamp near the corner. The small living room was cluttered, yes, but in a lived-in warm way. A sense of home radiated from every corner, from the family photos on the shelf to the drawings taped to the wall to the baby socks half hidden under the coffee table. This wasn't perfection. This was life, something he had never appreciated enough before. Now it all felt sacred. He reached for his phone, hesitation tightening his chest. The screen lit up with missed calls from earlier in the day. His parents, his business partner, a colleague. He ignored them all, except the first number, his mother. He stared at her name until the screen dimmed and went black. He knew he couldn't avoid her forever. After today, after learning he had twins, everything in his world had shifted, and avoiding the inevitable wouldn't protect anyone. He lifted the phone again and stepped quietly onto the small balcony attached to the living room so his voice wouldn't carry to the twins' room. The night air was cool, brushing against his arms as he slid the door closed behind him. After a steadying breath, he tapped his mother's number. The phone rang only once. "Aaron," Margaret's voice snapped through the speaker, clipped and tight. "You vanished again. I tried to reach you all day." He swallowed. "I know. I needed time." "Time for what?" "You can't keep running off like a rebellious child. You have responsibilities. People depend on you." He closed his eyes. The old frustration stirred. The same pressure that had weighed on him for years. The same expectations that had strained his marriage. "I know I have responsibilities," he said evenly. "And right now, my biggest ones are here." "Here?" she echoed. "That place you're staying in is beneath you. Your father is furious you've abandoned the house, your home, without explanation. It's temporary. That doesn't make it less ridiculous," she snapped. "What could you possibly have to handle there? That woman again?" Aaron stiffened. "Mother, you said you ran into her," she continued sharply. "Is that why you're still hiding in that apartment complex? What are you doing, Aaron?" He pressed his fingers to the bridge of his nose. "We're talking again." "Talking?" Margaret repeated. "And what good will that do? You divorced her for a reason." "Actually," he corrected quietly, "she divorced me." Margaret's silence tightened like a noose. "Well," she said finally, "that hardly matters now. What matters is that you stop making rash decisions. Come home and let's discuss things rationally." Aaron inhaled slowly. This was it, the moment to push past the fear he'd let rule him for years. "There's something I need to tell you," he said. "A beat." "Then what is it?" "It's big," he warned, "and I'm not ready to give full details yet. I'll explain soon. But I'm asking you to step back right now. Give me space." "Aaron, don't be ridiculous." "I mean it," he said firmly. "I need time. I need to make decisions for my life, not the life you expect me to maintain. I'll call when I'm ready." Margaret inhaled sharply, offended. "So you're choosing that woman again?" "I'm choosing my future," he replied softly but firmly. Before she could respond, he ended the call. He let the phone fall to his side as he exhaled shakily. His heart pounded, but something inside him felt lighter, like he'd pushed a weight off his chest he didn't realize he'd been carrying so tightly. Inside, Flora sat on the edge of the couch, having overheard only the tone of his voice through the glass. Not the words, just the tension. She bit her lip, her thoughts turning to her own guilt. She had hidden the twins from him. She had insisted on silence. She had convinced herself she was protecting them, but part of her knew a sliver of shame had played a role. Shame over the divorce, shame over being a single mother, shame over admitting she had walked away without telling him. She inhaled deeply. They needed transparency now. They needed clarity. When Aaron finally slid the door open and stepped back inside, Flora straightened. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. He nodded, though the exhaustion in his eyes said otherwise. "It will be," she hesitated, then shifted slightly on the couch to make space beside her. He took the unspoken invitation, dropping onto the cushion, his elbows resting on his knees. For a moment they didn't speak. The silence wasn't heavy, just full of unspoken things. Flora broke it gently. "Do you feel any better after talking to them?" Aaron rubbed his jaw. "I contacted my mom. It didn't go well." He offered a fragile smile. "But I didn't fold this time." Flora's chest warmed with quiet admiration. "I'm proud of you." He looked at her in surprise. She meant it. "I've been thinking," she admitted softly, twisting her fingers together, "about earlier, about everything. And I keep wondering, what if I'd told you from the start? What if I hadn't let fear get in the way?" Aaron turned toward her, shaking his head slightly. "Flora, don't blame yourself. I wasn't in a place back then where I would have understood anything clearly. I wasn't the man I wanted to be." "You were overwhelmed," she said quietly. "And I was hurt." He nodded. We were both drowning in silence. Flora let out a slow breath. "The truth is, I was scared, not just of you, but of your mother, your world, your expectations. I felt like if I told you I was pregnant, I'd be dragged back into that pressure again. I didn't want the twins growing up feeling like they had to fit into a world that didn't want me in it." Aaron's expression softened with regret. "I should have shielded you from that, from them, from everything. You didn't know how," she said gently. "We were young in our marriage, and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed." A quiet, tender understanding settled between them. He shifted slightly closer, not touching her, just enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Can I be honest?" he murmured. "You can." "I'm terrified," he admitted quietly. "Terrified of messing up again. Terrified the twins will resent me someday. Terrified you'll decide I don't deserve a place in their world." Flora looked at him with soft eyes. "Aaron, you're here now. That means something. That means everything." A breathy laugh escaped him. "You always knew how to say the thing I didn't know I needed." Flora smiled faintly. "We were a mess back then, but we're older now, hopefully wiser." Their eyes lingered, just a hint too long, a hint that carried a memory, a hint that carried a spark. He shifted an inch closer. She didn't move away. The air between them thickened with familiarity, warmth, and a quiet yearning neither dared act on yet. His hand slid along the couch cushion until it was close enough to graze hers. She lifted her gaze from his fingers to his face, her breath catching. For a heartbeat, a single heartbeat, they hovered at the edge of something electric, something familiar, something dangerous. But Flora was the first to look away, clearing her throat gently. "We should slow down," she whispered. "I know," he replied, equally soft. Their hands didn't touch, but neither pulled away. They sat in comfortable quiet for a minute before Flora spoke again. "We need a plan," she said. "A real plan. For the twins. For Xio parenting." Aaron nodded. "I agree. We should talk to a mediator eventually," she continued thoughtfully. "Not lawyers. I don't want this to turn ugly. Just someone who can help us formalize things fairly." "That makes sense," he said. She exhaled slowly. "And your parents need to be handled carefully. When the time comes to tell them the full truth, we should do it together." Aaron stiffened slightly. "My mother won't make it easy." "I know," Flora replied, "but we can handle her." His lips twitched. "We? Flora rolled her eyes softly, though a smile played at her lips. Yes, we. Don't make me regret being generous. Before Aaron could answer, his phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table, vibrating insistently. He glanced at the screen. His mother again. His jaw tightened. Flora saw the shift in his shoulders, the bracing, the irritation, the weariness. He let it ring. "Do you want to take it?" Flora asked softly. "No," he said firmly. "Not tonight. Not like this." But Margaret was nothing if not persistent. Seconds later, a new notification appeared, a text preview glowing boldly. "I'm coming by tomorrow. We need to talk." Aaron stared at the screen with a sinking feeling. Flora bit her lip, recognizing the look instantly. "What happened?" she asked. He turned the screen so she could read the message. Flora's stomach dropped. "Oh no." Aaron sighed. "She's not going to wait. She's coming." Flora leaned back into the couch, the weight of the moment settling heavily over both of them. The shadow of Beverly Hills was no longer distant. It was on its way to their front door. Tomorrow. The apartment fell into a heavy silence the second Flora read the text on Aaron's phone. "I'm coming by tomorrow. We need to talk." The message glowed boldly on the screen, its meaning unmistakable. Margaret was on her way. Not calling, not asking, coming. Flora's stomach tightened as she handed the phone back to him, her voice soft but steady. "She's not going to wait." Aaron slid the phone face down on the coffee table, rubbing the back of his neck. "She never waits. She pushes until everyone in the room bends." Flora crossed her arms slightly, a protective move she didn't even realize she'd made. "But you didn't bend tonight." That was a first, he admitted quietly, surprising even himself. Flora offered a small, tired smile. "It won't be the last." They didn't talk much after that, not because they had nothing left to say, but because both knew tomorrow would demand every ounce of emotional strength they possessed. Eventually, Flora went to bed, though sleep barely touched her. She tossed lightly under the sheets, images of Margaret's sharp eyes and cold expressions drifting through her mind. Would she argue? Would she demand control? Would she insult Flora in front of the twins? Would she try to take them? No, Flora whispered into the dark, steadying herself. Aaron won't let that happen. But a quiet fear lingered. In the living room, Aaron didn't sleep at all. He lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, replaying old memories of every time he'd failed to stand up to his mother. Her expectations had been the background noise to his entire life, polished, polite, suffocating. He remembered all the times Flora had tried to tell him how uncomfortable she felt around his family, how belittled she felt at dinner parties, how judged she felt at charity events. He had heard her, but he had never really listened. Now he was listening. Now he was ready. At some point during the early morning hours, he drifted into a restless half-sleep. When he woke, the sun was already warming the edges of the curtains. The apartment smelled faintly of oatmeal. Flora must have started breakfast for the twins. He sat up, ran a hand over his tired face, and moved toward the kitchen. Flora stood with her back to him, stirring a pot at the stove, while the twins babbled in their booster seats. Morning chaos filled the space. Toys underfoot, a dropped spoon clattering to the floor, Ryan shouting something that sounded like "up," even though he was already up. Aaron paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. It was ordinary and loud and messy, and it felt like the safest place he'd been in years. "Morning," Flora said, not turning around, but sensing him. "Morning," he replied softly, stepping into the kitchen. Emma spotted him and immediately smiled, kicking her feet. Ryan held out a fistful of cereal puffs, as if offering a gift. Aaron chuckled and accepted the soggy handful. "Thank you, buddy. You should eat," Flora said quietly, handing him a bowl. "You'll need strength today." He nodded gratefully. "I know." They didn't talk about Margaret over breakfast. Instead, they focused on the twins. Laughing at Ryan's attempt to feed Emma, laughing harder when Emma dramatically pushed his hand away, enjoying the small slice of calm before the storm. After breakfast came a quick bath for the twins, clean clothes, combed curls, and a bit of tidying around the living room. Flora fussed more than usual, adjusting blankets, folding laundry twice, placing toys neatly in a basket, and then removing them again. "Nervous?" Aaron asked gently, as she straightened a row of books they both knew the twins would pull down later. Flora exhaled shakily. "I'm not scared of her. I'm scared of what she might try to stir up. I don't want the twins to feel any tension. She won't get the chance, he promised. A sudden knock cut through the air. 3 sharp taps. Flora froze. Aaron felt his heart kick into high gear. She's early. He walked toward the door, glanced at Flora, and whispered, "Stay right behind me." Flora nodded, lifting Emma into her arms instinctively. Ryan toddled beside her, clinging to her leg. Aaron opened the door. There she stood. Margaret Williams, polished, perfectly dressed in a tailored cream blazer and diamond studs, hair styled immaculately, makeup flawless despite the early hour. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine, not in the dim hallway of a modest Los Angeles apartment building. Her nose twitched at the faint smell of baby lotion drifting from inside. Her eyes flashed across the hallway, taking in every detail: peeling paint, mismatched doormats, a distant hum of someone's music, the worn carpeting. Her lips tightened. "This," she said coldly, "is where you're living." Aaron held her gaze. Yes. Her eyes flicked past him, trying to peek inside, but Aaron stepped forward to block her view. "Mother, we'll talk out here." Margaret stiffened. "I beg your pardon?" "I said," he repeated calmly. "We'll talk in the hallway." Her eyebrows shot up. "You have never spoken to me like this." "Because I should have," Aaron replied. His voice was soft but unwavering. "A long time ago." Margaret scoffed. "I assume this sudden change is her doing?" A sharp, ugly little dagger thrown straight at Flora. Flora, standing a few feet behind Aaron, lifted her chin. She didn't step back. "She has nothing to do with how I'm speaking," Aaron said firmly. "This is me." Margaret crossed her arms. "Well, what is so urgent you felt the need to act like a runaway teenager?" Aaron took a breath. "You're going to hear something today that will change things, and before you hear it, you need to understand one thing." Margaret blinked. "Which is?" "I make my own decisions now," he said. "Not yours, not the family's. Mine." Margaret's jaw tightened. "You're being dramatic. I came here to help you. You came here to control the situation." Aaron corrected, not unkindly. "And that's not happening." Margaret stepped forward, lowering her voice. "Aaron, let me into that apartment." "No," he said simply. Her eyes widened in shock. "Excuse me?" "No," he repeated, this time louder. "Not until we talk." She stared at him like he'd spoken a language she didn't understand. "Aaron Samuel Williams, you will let me into that apartment this instant?" "No," he said a third time, the finality ringing through the hallway. Flora watched in stunned silence. She had never seen Aaron stand in front of someone like that. Not even during their marriage. He wasn't raising his voice, he wasn't angry, he was simply firm, grounded, different. Margaret shook her head, her earrings trembling. "I don't know what spell she has on you, but this is unacceptable." "It's not a spell," he cut in gently. "It's clarity." Margaret's lips parted in disbelief. Aaron inhaled deeply. "Mother, I have children." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. She stepped back, hand to her chest. "You, what?" "Children," Aaron repeated quietly. "A daughter and a son." Margaret's eyes darted past him again, this time sharper, desperate. Flora stepped forward, Emma in her arms and Ryan holding the hem of her shirt. She didn't hide. She didn't shrink. The second Margaret saw Emma's eyes, those unmistakable hazel blue eyes, her breath hitched. Oh my God," she whispered, staring at the twins as if she were seeing ghosts. Flora rested a protective hand on Ryan's head. Aaron moved slightly, standing between his mother and Flora, not blocking her completely, but making it clear there was a line Margaret would not cross. "You have grandchildren," Aaron said again. "Twins." Margaret looked at him with something between shock and accusation. "And you hid this from me?" Aaron shook his head. "I didn't know either, not until a few days ago." Margaret's gaze whipped toward Flora, sharp and cold. "You kept my grandchildren from me?" Flora felt the words like a lash, but she didn't bow. "I did what I thought was best at the time." Margaret scoffed. "Best? You isolated them, took them away from their rightful family." "No," Aaron said firmly, stepping directly in front of Flora now. "She protected them, from the chaos, from the pressure, from the world I let swallow me." Margaret's jaw dropped. Aaron continued, his voice steady. "Mother, If you want to be part of their lives, you will treat Flora with respect, no condescension, no commands, no power games. If you can't do that, then you won't have access to them. Margaret stared at him as though he were a stranger. You're choosing her over your own family? I'm choosing the family I failed once, Aaron responded simply. And I won't fail them again. Silence swallowed the hallway. Margaret stepped back, her expression unreadable. For the first time in years, she seemed truly unsettled. I need time, she said, barely above a whisper. Aaron nodded. Take it. Margaret turned slowly, her heels clicking softly as she walked down the hallway, stiff and graceful, but undeniably shaken. When she disappeared around the corner, Aaron closed the door gently and leaned against it, exhaling hard. His shoulders sagged. Flora placed a hand on his arm. Aaron, that, he muttered, was the hardest thing I've ever done, but there was no regret in his eyes, only relief. Flora stared at him for a long moment, her heartbeat uneven. You did good, she whispered. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time since they reunited, Flora saw it clearly. This was not the man she divorced. This was the man she had always hoped he could become. And it changed everything. For a long moment after the door clicked shut, neither Flora nor Aaron moved. The hallway confrontation had left the air inside the apartment charged in a way neither of them could immediately process. The twins sensed the shift, too. Emma clung a little tighter to Flora's shirt, and Ryan leaned against his mother's leg, hesitant, as if unsure whether the quiet meant safety or a brewing storm. Aaron stayed with his back against the door, breathing slowly, his chest rising and falling in uneven waves. His hands were slightly shaky, the adrenaline still coursing through him. Flora stepped forward, still holding Emma. Are you okay? She asked softly. He nodded but didn't speak yet. He swallowed hard, then let out a breath he'd clearly been holding for years. I've never talked to her like that, he finally said. Not once in my entire life. Flora shifted Emma to her other arm. I saw. She's never heard me say no. I don't think she knew what to do with it. He let out a tired laugh, rubbing the back of his neck. Honestly, I didn't know what I'd do with it. Flora offered a small smile. You did what you needed to. Aaron lifted his eyes to hers. I meant every word, and she could tell he did. There was no regret, no uncertainty behind his expression. He looked free, in a way she had never seen before. Emma reached toward Aaron with a small, uncertain whimper. Aaron's expression softened immediately. He stepped closer and gently took her into his arms. She snuggled against him, still slightly tense from the earlier energy, but calming under his steady hand. Flora let out a breathy laugh. I think they've chosen their comfort spot. Aaron crouched, shifting Emma to one hip and scooping Ryan with his other arm. Come here, little man. The twins clung to him like he was home. Flora watched, her chest tightening in a familiar, complicated way. Love, fear, and nostalgia wrapped into one. Do you want to sit with them a bit? She asked, gesturing to the couch. Yeah, he murmured, carrying both babies toward the sofa with the confidence of a man who finally believed he belonged there. The three of them settled into the cushions. Emma leaned her head against his chest, thumb in her mouth. Ryan's hand rested in the center of Aaron's shirt, gripping the fabric lightly as if anchoring himself. For a moment, no one spoke. The twins' quiet breathing filled the space, and Aaron simply held them, gently rocking back and forth. He looked over at Flora, his voice low. Thank you. For what? For being patient, for letting me learn, for letting me be here. His eyes softened. For trusting me a little more every day. She looked down at her hands. I'm trying. You're doing more than trying, he said gently. You let me handle them this morning. You let me help yesterday. You let me show up. Flora didn't respond right away. She glanced at the twins, now relaxed and half asleep, as if they were a reminder of what she'd fought so hard to protect. It's not easy, she said honestly, letting someone back in after feeling abandoned. After doing everything alone for so long. It's complicated. I know, he whispered. And I don't expect you to forget anything. I don't expect you to pretend the past didn't hurt. Flora blinked quickly, surprised at how deeply the sincerity in his voice landed. He took a breath. But I'm not that man anymore. She lifted her gaze to meet his. I can see that. Silence again, but this time warm, not awkward. The twins were fully asleep now, their soft breaths rising and falling against Aaron's chest. He brushed a curl from Emma's forehead, then rested his cheek lightly on her hair. Flora felt something twist inside her. Maybe it was seeing him hold them with such natural tenderness. Maybe it was hearing him defend her with a strength she'd never witnessed before. Maybe it was the quiet vulnerability behind his eyes. Whatever it was, she felt her guard shift. Not fall, but shift. She stood slowly. "Let's put them down before their necks get stiff." He nodded and followed her to the nursery nook. Together they laid the twins gently into their crib. Flora tucked the blanket lightly around them, while Aaron adjusted Ryan's stuffed bear so it faced him. Emma stirred, but didn't wake. Ryan let out a sleepy sigh. They stepped back quietly, watching their children breathe. Flora whispered, "They look so peaceful." Aaron nodded. "I want them to have that always." She bit the inside of her cheek, trying to steady emotions she hadn't planned on facing today. They walked into the living room again, both moving slower, as if neither wanted to break the fragile calm that lingered. Aaron sank onto the couch. Flora hesitated, then joined him. Not close, just near. For several long seconds they sat in quiet contemplation. Then Aaron turned to her. "Flora," he began softly, "I need to tell you something, and I don't want it to scare you or make things awkward." Her heartbeat picked up a little. "Okay," he exhaled. "I still love you." The words hung heavy and bare between them. Flora's breath caught in her throat. She expected warmth, maybe gratitude, but not this, not directness. Aaron continued, voice steady but filled with emotion. "I know we fell apart. I know I failed you. I know I spent too much of our marriage lost in work and expectations and trying to please everyone but you. But I never stopped loving you, even after the divorce, even when I didn't know how to say it, even when I didn't understand how much damage I'd done." Flora stared at him, her voice quiet. "Aaron, this is a lot. I know." He swallowed. "And I'm not asking you to jump back into anything. I'm not asking for forgiveness wrapped in a bow. I'm telling you how I feel because hiding it won't help either of us anymore." She looked away, trying to steady her thoughts. "We're rebuilding trust, and that's fragile. If we rush into emotions again—" "I won't rush," he said quickly. "I promise." Silence stretched, thick with honesty. Finally, Flora whispered, "I didn't stop loving you either." Aaron's breath hitched, eyes widening. "But," she said softly, "I learned to survive without you, and letting myself feel anything again scares me." He nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Then let's start slow, not as the couple we were, not with old patterns, something new, something healthier, something real." She looked at him again, really looked. This wasn't the distracted, overworked man she'd once married. This was someone who had been broken open and rebuilt. Her voice quivered slightly. "If we try again, it has to be different." "It will be," he promised. Their eyes locked, the moment pulling them closer with a gravitational pull neither fought. Aaron's hand moved slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and rested lightly on the couch cushion beside hers. Not touching, just near enough for the question to hang between them. Flora didn't move. He leaned in, carefully, slowly, searching her face for hesitation. When she didn't flinch, he inched closer. Their breaths mixed. The warmth of his presence brushed against her cheek. "Flora," he whispered. She closed the distance. Their lips met softly, cautious, tender, emotional, a kiss without urgency, without demands, a quiet rediscovery, a second chance whispered through touch, not words. Aaron's hand lifted to her jaw gently, thumb brushing her cheek. Flora leaned into him, feeling years of ache and longing melt into something softer. But just as the kiss deepened slightly, "Ma!" Ryan's tiny voice echoed behind them. Flora pulled back immediately, eyes wide. Aaron's mouth dropped open in surprise. They turned to see the twins waddling into the living room. Ryan rubbing his eyes with one fist, Emma dragging her blanket across the floor like a sleepy superhero cape. Flora gasped. "You two were supposed to be asleep." Ryan toddled to Aaron and lifted his arms, demanding to be held. Aaron scooped him up instinctively, trying and failing to hide his flustered state. Emma pointed at Flora and let out a dramatic squeak of up. Flora picked her up, cheeks warm. Ryan studied them both suspiciously. as if they'd been caught doing something extremely interesting. Flora whispered, "They have the worst timing." Aaron chuckled under his breath. "Maybe the best timing. Keeps us honest." Flora couldn't help but smile. And in the quiet of that moment, two parents holding their sleepy children, Flora felt something shift again. Not fear, not confusion, hope, real hope. For the first time they looked like a family trying again, not perfect, not certain, but willing. Aaron held Ryan closer. "So, trial family stage?" Flora rested her forehead lightly against Emma's curls. "One day at a time," he smiled softly. "Then let's start now." The rest of that day unfolded gently, like the universe knew they'd had enough drama for a while and decided to lower the volume. The twins, surprisingly, went back down for a proper nap after their little walk-in during the almost kiss. Maybe they sensed the emotional fatigue in the room and took pity on their parents. Flora stood in the doorway of the nursery nook, watching Emma and Ryan sleep. Aaron stood just behind her, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his body, but not so close that it felt intrusive. Their shoulders didn't touch, but the air between them held a different kind of closeness now. "You meant what you said?" Flora asked quietly, still watching the twins. "I meant all of it," Aaron replied. "About loving you, about wanting to do things differently, about being here." She let out a slow breath. "Then tomorrow, let's start with something simple." "Simple sounds good," he said. "I'm a big fan of simple these days." She glanced back at him. "Breakfast, all four of us, no rushing, no work calls, just us." His expression softened. "I'll be there." He slept on the couch again that night, not because she forced him to, but because they were building something with patience this time. Flora lay in bed listening to the faint sound of him tossing once, then settling. It calmed her more than it should have. The next morning, she woke up to the sound of quiet laughter coming from the kitchen. For a split second, panic sparked. Had someone come in? Then she recognized Aaron's voice. She slid out of bed and padded down the hall. The sight waiting for her in the kitchen made her stop at the doorway and just soak it in. Aaron stood at the stove, wearing one of her old, slightly too small aprons, trying to flip pancakes that were a little too thick and a little too uneven. Emma sat in her booster seat, clapping her hands every time he messed up. Ryan drummed on the table with a plastic spoon, squealing like this was the greatest show on earth. Okay, Aaron said, laughing as a pancake folded in on itself. "I never claimed to be a chef. I'm a property guy, not a brunch expert." "Da-da," Ryan blurted suddenly, the sound garbled but unmistakable. Everything froze. Flora's heart lurched. Aaron placed the spatula down slowly and turned, eyes wide. "What did he say?" Flora walked closer, stunned. "Say it again, baby." Ryan, delighted by the attention, smacked the spoon down and repeated, "Da-da." Emma, never one to be overshadowed, lifted both arms and added proudly, "Da." Aaron looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him and replaced it with clouds. His eyes shone, throat working as he swallowed hard. "Hey, buddy," he whispered, moving to Ryan's side and kneeling. You really think I'm that?" Ryan leaned forward and grabbed his face with both hands, smushing his cheeks. "Da-da," he said again, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Flora pressed a hand over her mouth, tears pricking her eyes. This wasn't a title she had planned to rush. No conversation had been had, no formal introduction. The twins simply decided. Aaron pulled Ryan into his arms, kissed his forehead, then looked at Flora with such raw emotion it almost made her step back. "I won't ever run from that again," he said softly. Her chest ached, but in the good way. "Don't." The pancakes ended up a little burnt, but no one cared. They ate together, all four of them around the small table. Emma smeared syrup on her chin. Ryan tried to feed his bear, and Flora kept catching Aaron staring at them like he was afraid blinking would make them disappear. Days blurred into a gentle pattern after that. Every morning Aaron was there. Sometimes he'd arrive with coffee and groceries. Sometimes he'd arrive with nothing but his presence, hair slightly messy, eyes still tired from late night work but determined to be present for breakfast. He started scheduling his calls around the twins' wake windows. If he had to jump on a video meeting, he'd do it from the small table in the corner, laptop open while Emma toddled around his chair and Ryan pushed a car across the floor. More than once, a distant investor or colleague heard faint squeals in the background. "Is that a child?" one voice asked during a call. Aaron smiled slightly, eyes drifting toward the living room where the twins were building towers with blocks. Yeah, 2, actually. Pause. I didn't know you had kids, the voice said, surprised. I do, Aaron replied simply, and they're my priority now. Flora heard that from the kitchen and paused mid-dish, heart swelling. That sentence would never have come out of the old Aaron's mouth. Not that plainly, not that confidently. He still worked hard, but differently now. He bounced a leg while waiting for nap time so he could rush an email. He turned down a dinner invitation because my kids go to sleep at 8, and I read them a story. He moved a meeting from late evening to midday because I do bath time. Flora watched all of it quietly at first, waiting, analyzing, wary that this could be temporary guilt wrapped in grand gestures. But it didn't fade. If anything, it deepened. One Wednesday afternoon, she came back from teaching at the community center and froze at the sight in her living room. Aaron on the floor in a button-down shirt and loosened tie, his laptop open and muted beside him while he used a toy truck as a prop in an improvised story. And then the brave truck climbed the big cliff, he narrated, moving the truck over a pillow, because his friends needed help. He wasn't scared, not even a little. Ryan crawled after the truck, yelling something that sounded like "Go! Go!" Emma sat beside them, clutching her rabbit and watching intently. Flora leaned against the doorway and listened. Aaron's eyes lifted and met hers. He smiled, small, soft, proud. Meeting ran long, he murmured. So I turned it into storytime intermission. Did your clients hear any of this? She teased lightly. Probably, he said. They'll survive. She stepped in and dropped her bag onto a chair. How did it go? Good, he said. Better once I stopped pretending I didn't have a life outside of boardrooms. Her smile faded into something more serious. You really are changing. He met her gaze, his voice lower. I'm not changing for them, or for optics. I'm changing because I was wrong about what mattered. She believed him. Not instantly, not blindly, but steadily, like a bridge being repaired board by board. Nights took on a new kind of rhythm, too. Bath time became a group event. Flora washed while Aaron kept the twins from trying to drink the bathwater. Emma loved to pour water from one cup into another, concentrating so hard that her tongue poked out between her teeth. Ryan splashed theatrically, soaking everyone within range. One evening, after a particularly vigorous splash session, Aaron sat on the bathroom floor, drenched, laughing so hard his eyes watered. I own a portfolio of buildings, he said between laughs, and I'm losing a battle to a 1-year-old with a rubber duck. Flora laughed with him, handing him a towel. Welcome to real life. After baths came pajamas, lotion, and quiet play. Then 2 bedtime stories, one for each twin, even though they both listened to both. The 4 of them would sit on the rug near the crib. Sometimes Flora would read while Aaron gently rubbed Emma's back. Other times Aaron would read in his slightly dramatic voice, turning every line into a performance, making the twins shriek with sleepy delight. The first night he read alone, Flora stood in the doorway and watched, arms folded, but heart open. Once there was a little bear, he read, who thought he had to be the biggest and the toughest to be loved. But he found out that being there was more important than being the strongest. His voice softened on that line. Flora blinked back, a sudden burn in her eyes. When the twins finally drifted off to sleep, they would step into the living room and breathe like they just finished a marathon. Some nights, Aaron went back to his own unit to sleep. Most nights, he didn't. At first, he'd say things like, I'll crash on the couch so I can do morning breakfast, or I've got an early call, it's easier to start the day here. Both were technically true, but Flora could feel the deeper reason. He didn't want to leave. She noticed a slow migration happening without any big announcement. A charger appeared on the side table near the couch. A stack of his shirts showed up in the corner of her closet, hung neatly but undeniably there. His toothbrush took its place next to hers in the bathroom cup one morning, like it had paid rent. One night, after the twins were asleep and the apartment had settled into quiet, Flora sat on the couch with a mug of tea, while Aaron typed quietly on his laptop beside her. She glanced at the closed door that separated her place from his unit next door. The thin wall that once felt like protection now felt awkward, unnecessary. You're staying here again? She asked, not with annoyance, just curiosity. He looked up from his screen. If you're okay with that. She shrugged lightly. The couch hasn't complained yet. He smiled, I can get a better pull-out, or a foldable bed that doesn't murder my back. You don't have to." "I want to," he cut in gently. "I know I have a whole unit next door, but it doesn't feel like home. Not like this." She took a sip of tea thinking, "We can't live like this forever," she said finally. "Half in, half out. It's fine for now, but the twins will grow. They'll need more space, more structure." "Of course you have," she said with a tiny smile. "Your brain never stops planning." "This time I want to plan with you," he said. "Not for you." That landed. She rested the mug on her knee. "So what are you thinking?" "First thought, old me would say, let's move back to a big house in the hills," he admitted. "Something with a yard, big rooms, a view. Something that looks impressive on paper." "That's exactly what makes me nervous," Flora replied honestly. "That house never felt like mine. It felt like I had to walk a certain way, talk a certain way, host a certain way just to prove I belonged." "I know," he said quietly. "I heard that in your voice before, but I didn't really understand it until I left, until I lived somewhere like this." He looked around her small apartment, at the art on the walls, the toys in the corners, the worn but comfortable couch. "I've never felt more grounded than I do here," he said. She blinked. "Even with the thin walls and janky plumbing?" He chuckled softly. "Especially with those." They sat in thoughtful silence for a moment. Flora spoke slowly. "We could get a larger place, but not for status, for us, for the twins, for what feels right. I don't want to move just because it checks a box or because it sounds good when someone asks where we live." He nodded. "So we make the decision emotionally first, not financially, not socially." She met his gaze. "We build around us, not the other way around." His eyes warmed. "I like that," she sighed. "Maybe that means we stay in this neighborhood. Maybe we find a bigger unit in this same complex, or one nearby. Somewhere near the community center. Somewhere that still feels like my world, not just yours." "Our world," he corrected gently. "If you're okay with that." Her chest tightened in that way that meant she was letting hope in again. "Our world," she echoed. "So, step one," he said. "I stop half living next door and actually live where my family is." She raised an eyebrow. "You're really ready for that?" He smiled, the kind that started in his eyes. "I've been ready since the night I knocked on your door and saw Emma in your arms. I just didn't have the courage to admit it." Flora looked toward the closed door that led to his unit. The thought of him truly moving in had seemed impossible just weeks ago. Now, it felt like a natural next step. "I'm not promising we'll never move again," she said. "Or that I won't change my mind about house size 10 times when the twins start running full speed across the room. But if we move, it'll be because it's right for us, not because your mom expects a certain zip code." He let out a soft laugh. "Deal." 2 evenings later, after they'd settled on the decision to fully share her space for now, while exploring bigger options together, Flora stood at her front door and watched a quietly symbolic parade. Aaron came out of his unit next door carrying a medium-sized box. Nothing flashy, just a cardboard box with his things. A stack of books, a couple of framed photos, a pair of worn sneakers he refused to throw away, a mug she bought him years ago that said, "Coffee first, questions later." Ryan toddled between the doors, proudly dragging one of Aaron's sandals like he was helping move mountains. Emma held onto her stuffed rabbit and watched solemnly, as if she understood this was important. "Last box," Aaron said, setting it down gently just inside her door. "What else is left?" Flora asked. "Just furniture I'm not keeping," he said. "Some clothes, a coffee maker. I'll either donate or store them. The landlord already knows I'm giving up the unit." She nodded, absorbing that. "So you're really closing that chapter?" He looked at her, then the twins, then the box. "Yeah, I am." He walked back out into the hallway one more time, standing between the 2 doors, the one that had been his and the one that was hers. The twins stood in the doorway beside Flora. Ryan clapped randomly. Emma leaned into her mother's leg. Aaron turned the key in his old lock, then removed it. He walked back to Flora and placed the key in her hand, closing her fingers around it. "For the record," he said softly, "this," he gestured to her apartment, "already feels more like home than any house I've ever owned." Flora's throat tightened. "Home isn't square footage." He smiled. "Home is this." The twins shuffled forward, wrapping their tiny arms around each of his legs. He laughed softly and looked down at them, then back up at Flora. She stepped aside to let him fully inside. He lifted the box, carried it past the threshold, and set it down near the couch. It was such a simple action, but for them, it was the start of something real. This wasn't him swooping in with grand promises and mansions. This was Aaron quietly choosing to build a life from the inside out, in a modest apartment that was now not just hers, not just his, but theirs. As evening settled over Los Angeles outside, the sounds of the city hummed faintly through the walls, mingling with the soft babbles of Emma and Ryan, and the low conversation of two people finally choosing the same direction at the same time. Home was no longer an address to impress others. It was a decision they had made together, and for the first time, it felt like the foundation was strong enough to carry whatever came next. The first time Emma called Aaron Dada, it slipped out like an accident over pancakes. By the third time she said it, and Ryan echoed her with the proud da, it was no longer an accident. It was a reality neither Flora nor Aaron could pretend was temporary. Days had passed since Aaron carried that last box from his old unit into Flora's apartment. The layout was still the same: one bedroom, a little nursery nook, a cozy living room with toys in every corner, and a small kitchen that always seemed to hold the smell of coffee or something baking. But the feeling inside the apartment had changed. It no longer felt like Flora's and Aaron visiting. It felt like their home. That morning the sun filtered through the curtains and painted soft rectangles on the floor. Emma sat on the rug, trying to fit a block into a shape sorter with intense concentration. Ryan, always more chaotic, pushed a toy car straight into the sorter, then laughed at his own creativity. Aaron sat cross-legged on the floor nearby, quietly sipping coffee from his coffee first, questions later mug while he watched them. Flora stood in the kitchen doorway, drying her hands and just taking in the view. Her children, her ex-husband, her almost something again, all in one frame that somehow didn't feel wrong anymore. She stepped closer. "We should talk to them," she said gently. Aaron looked up. "About what?" She gave him a look that said he already knew. He did. "Right," he murmured, putting the mug down. "Not just Dada as a sound, but as who I am." Flora nodded, sitting down beside him. "They already chose the word. We just haven't honored it out loud yet." There was a quiet weight to that. For months he'd been the nice neighbor, then Aaron, then the man who showed up every day. Now the twins had named him without a script. "You sure you're ready?" she asked softly. "I've been ready since the day in the park," he replied. "I just didn't know if you were—" She was quiet for a moment, then nodded. "They deserve to know, and you deserve to be seen for what you are to them." He swallowed, emotion tightening his throat. "Okay, let's do it." Emma's block bounced out of the sorter and rolled toward them. She squealed and crawled over with that determined little wobble, then plopped herself directly into Aaron's lap like she owned the spot. Ryan followed, half climbing over Flora's knees and half flopping into the curve of her side. Aaron glanced at Flora, silently asking for one last check. She met his eyes and nodded once. "Go ahead." He shifted so he was facing both twins, one on each knee. He lowered himself just a little, so his eyes were on their level. His hands settled gently on their backs. His voice, when he spoke, was steady but thick with feeling. "Hey, you two," he began softly. "Can you look at me for a minute?" Emma stared up instantly, wide-eyed. Ryan twisted his little body so he could see Aaron's face too, one hand still holding onto Flora's shirt as if he needed the connection. "I want to tell you something important," Aaron continued. "Something about who I am to you." He glanced at Flora again, and she nodded, her eyes already shining. "You've been calling me Dada," he said, a small smile tugging his mouth. "And you were right." Ryan let out a delighted babble at the sound of the word. Emma brought both hands to her mouth like she knew this was a big moment. "I'm your daddy," Aaron said, the word coming out reverent. "I'm your daddy, Emma. I'm your daddy, Ryan. I was there when you weren't born yet, even though I didn't know it at the time. And I'm here now. I'll be here for everything I can be from this day forward." The twins didn't understand all those words, not in the way adults did. But they understood tone. They understood warmth. They understood the way Flora reached out and rested a hand on Aaron's arm. Emma spoke first, her voice small but clear. "Didi, it wasn't perfect. It was better." Aaron's eyes flooded. "Yeah," he whispered. "Didi, that's me. Ryan slapped both hands on Aaron's chest and shouted, "Da!" Flora laughed through her tears, wiping one quickly before it fell. Aaron pulled both of them into a hug, trying not to squeeze too tightly. "I love you," he murmured into their curls. "I love you so much." Flora watched the three of them, her heart aching in a way that wasn't pure pain anymore. It was something more complex, relief, gratitude, and a quiet acceptance that this was always where their story had been heading, even through all the detours. "Do you want them to hear it from me too?" she asked. Aaron nodded. Flora moved closer and stroked Emma's back, then Ryan's. "He's your daddy," she confirmed gently. "This is Daddy. Mama and Daddy both love you, very, very much." Emma pointed at her own chest. "Emma, that's right," Flora smiled. "Emma. And Daddy." Emma pressed her forehead against Aaron's chin, satisfied. Ryan put his head on Aaron's shoulder and patted his face like he was affirming the contract. The moment settled into them. No big speeches, no formal ceremony, just truth spoken out loud between four people on a living room rug. Later that day, they packed the double stroller for a trip to the community center. Flora fastened Emma's straps while Aaron wrangled Ryan, who decided the stroller was an enemy and went temporarily limp in protest. After a minute of toddler negotiation and the promise of snacks, he finally sat down. "You sure about this?" Aaron asked as he clicked the last buckle. "Me going with you to the center today?" Flora nodded, slipping the diaper bag over her shoulder. "They're part of my world. If you're their father, you're part of it too." He smiled softly. "I like the sound of that." The community center bustled the way it always did, a mix of kids' laughter, adults chatting, basketballs bouncing in the gym, and the faint squeak of sneakers on polished floors. The murals on the walls, some of which Flora had helped paint, added color and life to the building. As they walked in, several familiar faces greeted Flora. "Hey girl," called one of the other instructors, waving. "You brought your squad today?" Flora laughed. "Always." Her eyes flicked to Aaron briefly. He stood a bit taller, clearly aware that he was stepping deeper into her space. Not the gala world, not high society circles. This was her place. Kids in worn sneakers, parents in work uniforms, staff who knew her by name and not by who she was attached to. One of the program coordinators, a woman who had worked alongside Flora for years, raised an eyebrow as she approached. "Flora, you didn't tell me we were getting extra help," she said, nodding toward Aaron. Flora smiled. "This is Aaron, the twins' father." The woman's eyes widened briefly with understanding, but she didn't comment on it. She stuck out her hand. "Nice to finally meet you." Aaron shook her hand firmly. "Nice to meet you too. I've heard a lot about this place." She smirked. "All good things, I hope." "Nothing but," he replied. Over the next hour, Aaron followed Flora's lead. She didn't introduce him as some big title. No real estate investor talk, no mention of wealth. Just Aaron, the twins' father, there to help. He sat cross-legged with a group of kids who were trying to paint with more enthusiasm than technique, carefully setting extra cups of water out of splashing range. Flora guided a small art class, showing children how to mix colors without making everything brown. At one point, Aaron watched her as she stood at the front of the room, explaining how art could be a way to tell stories without words. She spoke with her hands, with her eyes, with a warmth that lit up the room more than any expensive chandelier ever had. He realized something then that he wished he had seen sooner. This was who she'd always been. Before the hills, before the mansion, before the arguments about time and presence, a woman rooted in community, in creativity, in impact. When class wrapped up, the program coordinator pulled Flora aside to talk through a possible summer project. Aaron found himself lingering near a bulletin board plastered with flyers, youth showcases, neighborhood festivals, open mic nights. The words Annual Youth Art Show caught his eye. The flyer was outdated, edges curling, but it mentioned how funding had been cut last year and the event canceled. He felt a nudge inside. He could do something about that. But the man he used to be would have walked over to the coordinator, written a check, and placed his name in bold at the bottom of the flyer without asking what anyone actually needed. He wasn't that man now, so instead, he waited until Flora finished talking and walked over to her. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. "Sure," she replied, shifting Emma on her hip. He gestured toward the flyer, This art show, you used to do this, right? She nodded, and a shadow of sadness crossed her eyes. Yeah, it was one of my favorite events. The kids would work all year, and we'd fill the hall with their pieces. Parents would come, local folks would walk through. It gave them something to be proud of. Funding got slashed, though. We managed smaller showcases in the classroom, but it's not the same. He swallowed. If the center wanted to bring it back, what would that take? Flora tilted her head, studying him. Money, obviously. But also time, volunteers, coordination. We'd need supplies, maybe a little budget for snacks, printing, basic promotion. It doesn't have to be huge, just meaningful. Would you want to bring it back? He asked. She looked at the flyer for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Yeah, I would. Okay, he said. I'd like to help, not take over. Help. She searched his face, looking for ego, for the old pushiness. She didn't see it. How? She asked. However you need me, he said truthfully. If that means writing a check and staying behind the scenes, I'll do it. If it means showing up to set up chairs and sweep floors, I'll do that too. You lead. I'll follow your call on what's useful. A small smile crept across her face. You really are different. I'm learning, he said, smiling back, slowly. But I'm learning. She glanced at the coordinator, who was pretending not to listen too closely but was absolutely listening. If you're serious, we can set up a meeting. Talk through what a sponsorship might look like without turning this into some vanity project. Deal, Aaron replied. You set the terms. I'll support. He felt no need to announce who he was or what he owned. This wasn't about that. This was about showing up in her world, not dragging her back into his old one. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to slide lower in the sky, Flora suggested they walk to the park. They took the stroller, but Emma and Ryan only lasted about 10 minutes in it before demanding freedom, so Aaron carried Ryan on his shoulders while Flora held Emma's hand and let her toddle beside her, taking wide, proud steps. The park wasn't glamorous. It was simple, patches of grass, a few worn benches, a playground that had clearly seen better days but still did its job. Kids ran around chasing each other. Someone played music quietly from a portable speaker, and a couple of teenagers practiced skate tricks on the path. This feels more real than any event I've ever been dragged to, Aaron said. Flora smirked. You mean no one announced your last name over a microphone the moment you walked in? Thankfully, no, he chuckled. They found a shady spot near a tree and spread out an old blanket Flora kept tucked under the stroller. Ryan scrambled down from Aaron's shoulders immediately, heading straight for a patch of dirt like it was treasure. Emma flopped onto the blanket and hugged her rabbit, staring up at the sky. Do we have any good pictures of all four of us? Aaron asked suddenly. Flora frowned, thinking. Not really. Just random ones on our phones where someone's half cut off or one twin is crying. We should fix that, he said. Not staged, just us. Right now. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, then hesitated. I'll need help, though, unless I've learned how to grow a third arm. Give it here, Flora said, standing up. He looked confused. But you won't be in it. She shook her head. We do this right. She scanned the area and spotted a nearby woman sitting on a bench, scrolling on her phone while her child played nearby. Flora walked over with a polite smile. Hi, excuse me, she said. Would you mind taking a quick photo of us? Just one or two. It's kind of a big day. The woman smiled kindly. Of course. Aaron gathered the twins on the blanket, one on each side of him. Flora dropped down beside Emma, smoothing her curls. For a second, Aaron's arm brushed Flora's shoulder. He didn't move it away. Ready? The woman called. Flora wrapped an arm around Emma and leaned slightly toward Aaron. He instinctively mirrored the motion, leaning toward her while keeping a steady hand on Ryan's back. The twins were distracted, Emma pointing at a passing dog, Ryan mid-laugh. The woman snapped one picture. Hold on, one more, she said. This time, Flora looked directly at the camera. Aaron did too. Their shoulders touched fully now. Emma grabbed Aaron's sleeve. Ryan squinted like he was trying to figure out the sun. Snap. The woman returned the phone with a warm nod. You have a beautiful family. Flora's breath caught for just a second at the word. Thank you, she said softly. Aaron glanced at the screen as she handed the phone back to him. The photo wasn't perfect. Emma's hair was slightly out of place. Ryan's sock was half falling off. Flora's smile was a little trembly at the edges, and Aaron's shirt had a faint smudge from earlier. But the joy was real. There were no chandeliers, no step-and-repeat banners, no journalists, just 4 people on a worn blanket in a neighborhood park, looking like what they truly were. A family finding its way back together. "Send that to me," Flora said quietly. "You'll get every copy," Aaron promised. He slid the phone back into his pocket but carried the picture in his mind long after. For once he didn't care how he looked or whether it would impress anyone. He only cared that it was real. That evening, after the twins had passed out from the full day, community center, park, snacks, laughter, Flora and Aaron sat on the couch with the lights low. He pulled up the photo again and turned the screen toward her. "This," he said softly, "is the kind of legacy I want now." Flora stared at the image, then leaned her head on his shoulder. "No big announcements," she murmured. "No press, just us, in that small living room, with baby toys scattered underfoot, and a slightly crooked family photo glowing on a phone screen. They didn't need anyone else's approval. They had something better. Truth spoken out loud. A father introduced, a family claimed, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like they were stepping into a future that belonged to all 4 of them. The text came on a quiet Thursday afternoon, right as Flora was wiping mashed banana off the dining table and trying to keep Ryan from turning his sippy cup upside down. Aaron stood near the window, rocking Emma absently on his hip while he checked his phone. His face shifted, just slightly, but Flora caught it. She knew that look now. "Is that her?" Flora asked, tossing the paper towel into the trash. Aaron glanced over, then nodded once. "Yeah, my mom." He read the message again before answering. Emma tugged gently at his collar, unaware of the weight in the air. "What did she say?" Flora asked, walking over. He exhaled. "She wants to see us, all of us." "Properly," her word. "Not in a hallway while she's in shock." His mouth twitched. "She said she needs to meet the twins as their grandmother." Flora's stomach tightened. "And your dad?" "She said he'll be there too," Aaron replied. "If we agree." Flora pulled out a chair and sat, suddenly aware of how tired her legs were. "Where?" "She suggested the house," he said, and Flora didn't miss the way his shoulders tensed. "But I told her that's not happening. If we do this, it's on neutral ground." Flora nodded slowly. "Good." He stepped closer and lowered Emma into her booster seat, buckling her in. "I'm not agreeing to anything until we talk. All of us. You, me, and what we're comfortable with." She appreciated that more than she knew how to say in that second. For so long, big decisions had happened around her, not with her. This was different. She folded her hands on the table. "Okay, so let's be real. Do you want this?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he moved to Ryan and gently removed the cup from his hand before juice ended up on the floor. He ruffled the boy's curls, then finally sat down across from Flora. "I want our kids to have a chance at a bigger family," he said honestly. "I don't want them growing up thinking every branch of their tree is cut off, but not at the cost of your peace, or theirs, or mine, frankly." Flora chewed the inside of her cheek. "She hurt me, not just with words, though those stung. It was the looks, the ways I felt small in rooms I should have felt loved in." Her throat tightened, but she pushed through. "I won't sit through that again. Not for their money, not for their approval." "You won't have to," Aaron said firmly. "If she can't show basic respect, we leave. No debate. And if she tries to twist the story," Flora asked, "make it sound like I took the twins from you on purpose to punish you, like I'm some villain who shut you out." His jaw tightened. "I'll shut that down too. I'm not letting her rewrite what happened. I'll own my part." In front of her, Flora studied him. There was no hesitation in his eyes. No but waiting behind his words. Just resolve. "What about where we meet?" she asked. "I'm not walking into that big house and sitting on a chair that costs more than my car to be evaluated." He nodded quickly. "I already told her it has to be neutral. I was thinking..." He paused. "There's a small private room at that quiet restaurant near downtown. Not fancy, just low key and calm. I can reserve it. No staff hovering, no crowd, just us and a server who knows to give us space. You okay with something like that?" Her shoulders loosened a little. "That's better. Less of a performance." He reached across the table. not grabbing, just resting his hand palm up in the space between them. If at any point you're uncomfortable, we go. No speeches, no guilt. We scoop up the twins and walk out. Deal? She looked at his hand for a moment. Then she placed her fingers over his. Deal, she said softly. He squeezed gently. I'll text her back. We'll set it up for this weekend. Gives us time to prepare. And to pack enough snacks that the twins don't stage a revolution in the middle of the meal. A reluctant smile tugged at her mouth. You learn fast. He grinned. I have 2 very demanding teachers. Saturday arrived quicker than either of them liked. Flora stood in front of the mirror in their bedroom, smoothing the front of her dress for what felt like the 10th time. It was a simple dress, soft heel, knee-length, flattering without trying too hard. She'd chosen it because it made her feel like herself, not like a guest star in someone else's world. Behind her, on the bed, Emma lay on her back kicking her legs, while Flora's mother spoke to her through a video call on the phone, propped against a pillow. The screen showed her mom's familiar face, kind and steady. How are you feeling, baby? Her mother asked. Really? Flora adjusted one of Emma's tiny barrettes and gave a half smile toward the phone. Like I'm walking into a midterm exam I didn't study for. Her mother chuckled softly. You've been studying for this your whole life without knowing it. You know who you are. You know who they are. You know what your babies need. That's your prep. Flora nodded, swallowing. I just don't want to let my anger talk for me. Anger tells the truth sometimes, her mother said gently. Just make sure love gets the last word. Flora blinked quickly, fighting back sudden tears. You always know how to say it. Runs in the family, her mom teased. You be yourself in that room. Don't shrink, don't puff up, just be you. The woman who carried those babies, fed them, stayed up at night, prayed over them. Nobody gets to make you feel small after all that. You hear me? Yes, ma'am, Flora murmured. On the screen, her mother smiled softly. And if they say anything sideways, remember I'd fly out there and set every last one of them straight if needed. Flora laughed. I know you would. Aaron's stepping up, her mother added, more serious now. Flora glanced toward the doorway, where Aaron's voice drifted faintly from the living room as he talked to the twins about shoes and snacks. Yeah, she said. He really is good, her mother said, because this is his moment to prove it, not just to them, but to you. Call me afterward and tell me how it went. I will, Flora promised. By the time she hung up, Emma was dressed in a tiny cream dress with little flowers, hair in 2 puffballs, socks clean and smooth. Ryan, in the living room, wore a button-up shirt, little dark pants, and shoes he kept trying to kick off whenever Aaron looked away. This boy acts like socks are his mortal enemy, Aaron muttered, trying to quickly re-secure one that had mysteriously disappeared. Flora walked out and paused, taking in the sight of all 3 of them. Aaron wore dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, and a blazer, put together but not flashy. His hair was neat, his face clean-shaven, but there was nothing stiff about him. He looked like a man who could walk comfortably through both their worlds. You look good, she said before she could stop herself. He glanced up, eyes widening a little as he took her in. So do you, he replied, a little awe in his voice. Very good. Her cheeks warmed. Ready? As I'll ever be, he replied. Let's go introduce them to the new rules. The restaurant sat tucked on a quiet street downtown, far from glossy magazine spreads and charity columns. Inside, the lighting was warm and soft, the decor modern but modest. A small sign near the hostess stand listed the specials in chalk. Aaron had reserved a private room at the back, just off the main dining area. A server led them through, smiling as Emma pointed at a plant and declared, "Tree." That's right, Flora murmured, adjusting her on her hip. They stepped into the room to find a rectangular table set for 6. At one end, Aaron's parents sat side by side. His father was in a dark blazer and open-collar shirt, hair silvering at the temples, posture straight. His expression was reserved but not unfriendly. He rose as they entered. Margaret stood as well, though more slowly. She wore a light blue blouse and a pearl necklace, her usual polished look in place. Her eyes went instantly to the twins, and something flickered there, something softer than indignation but wrapped in discomfort. Flora felt her spine lengthen. She shifted Emma to her other hip and held Ryan's hand firmly. "Mother, Dad," Aaron said, his tone even. "Thank you for coming." His father extended a hand. "Of course," he said. "We needed to—" Margaret's gaze remained fixed on the children. "So these are—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. "Emma and Ryan," Aaron supplied. "Our children—" The word hung in the air like a marker. Flora swallowed. "Hello," she offered, keeping her voice steady. "Thank you for meeting us here." His father gave a small nod. "Thank you for agreeing to it," he said. "We appreciate the chance." Margaret's lips pressed together briefly. Then she said, "Hello, Flora," in a tone that was polite, if still restrained. "Hi," Flora replied. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ryan broke the tension by letting out a loud, delighted "Hi!" toward the table, waving his little hand. The corner of Aaron's father's mouth twitched upward. Margaret's eyes, despite herself, warmed by a fraction. "Let's sit," Aaron suggested, gesturing to the chairs. He pulled out a seat for Flora beside him, across from his parents. 2 high chairs had been set up on their side of the table, and the server quickly helped them settle the twins in, placing cups of water and small bowls of cut fruit within reach. The first few minutes were clumsy. The server took drink orders and rattled off specials while everyone pretended this was a normal lunch and not the most emotionally loaded meal of their year. Emma banged a spoon lightly against her bowl. Ryan tried to stack crackers in a tower. So Aaron's father began once the server left, folding his hands. "I must admit we were surprised to hear that you had children this age, that I have children this age," Aaron corrected gently. "Please don't leave Flora out of that sentence." His father nodded slowly. "You're right." Margaret picked at a napkin seam for a second, then looked up. "Why didn't you tell us?" she asked Flora, the words tight but not as sharp as before. "About them, about all this." Flora studied her carefully. There were a million ways she could answer that question, some harsher than others. But this was not about winning an argument. This was about setting a foundation. "I didn't tell him at first," she said honestly. "That was my mistake, my fear. I own that. But after the divorce, I didn't feel safe opening that door." Margaret stiffened. "Safe? We would never harm a child. I never thought you would physically hurt them," Flora replied calmly. "But I did worry about control, about being told where to live, how to raise them, what kind of mother I was allowed to be. I already felt judged as your daughter-in-law. I couldn't risk that spilling over onto my kids." Aaron's father looked pained, but he nodded for her to continue. She took a breath. "I also didn't trust Aaron back then. He was gone more than he was home. He'd say he'd be somewhere and then not show up. I didn't want our children to be born into that pattern, so I left. I did it alone." Margaret's eyes glistened in a way Flora didn't expect. "You think we wanted him to neglect his own home?" "I think," Flora said gently, "that you raised him to believe success solves everything, that if he just pushed harder, earned more, climbed higher, everything else would fall into place. I think feelings were optional in your world, and presence was second to prestige." Aaron closed his eyes briefly, the truth hitting him even as he'd already begun to see it himself. His father breathed out slowly. "We wanted him to have security, options, a life we didn't have growing up." "I believe that," Flora said. But somewhere along the line, that message became louder than love. Margaret's gaze dropped to her hands. "I may have said things I shouldn't have," she murmured. "About your background, about your family. It was unkind. I told myself I was protecting my son's future. But looking at them—" She glanced at Emma, who was currently trying to spear a piece of fruit with her fingers. "It's clear I wasn't protecting much of anything." Flora felt her throat tighten. That was not an apology, not fully. But it was more than she'd ever expected to hear from this woman. "I appreciate you saying that," Flora responded quietly. "For their sake especially." Emma suddenly dropped a chunk of strawberry. It bounced once and landed near Margaret's hand. The older woman blinked, then instinctively picked it up. Emma grinned and reached toward her with the sticky palm. Without thinking too long, Margaret extended her clean hand and let the little girl grab her finger. Emma gave it a satisfied pat, then resumed eating. Aaron watched the contact, something easing inside him. His father spoke next. "We can't undo the past," he said. "I'm not going to pretend we handled everything well. We didn't. But we'd like to try, if you'll let us, to know them, to repair what can be repaired." Flora met his gaze. "Trying is good, but there have to be boundaries." "Name them," Aaron said gently, looking at her, then at his parents. "This is where we set them." She held his eyes for a moment, grateful for the invitation. "I won't tolerate being talked down to," she said levelly. "Not in front of the twins, not behind their backs. No comments about where I'm from, how I grew up, or what kind of work I value. No more jokes dressed as compliments." Margaret flinched a little at that. "I won't have you questioning my choices as a mother in front of them," Flora added. "If you disagree, you can talk to us privately. As adults, we'll listen, but not through criticism disguised as concern." Aaron's father nodded. "That's fair, and I won't be cut out of decisions," Flora continued. "These are our children, not heirs to a throne. If you want to be part of their lives, it's as grandparents, not as replacement parents or board chairs. Love them, spoil them a bit if you want, but don't try to run their lives." Ryan, oblivious to the gravity of the conversation, was now making a tower out of crackers and giggling every time one fell. Margaret let out a long breath. "You think very poorly of us." Flora shook her head. "I think you're human. I think you love your son and want what you think is best. I also think your idea of best sometimes came at the cost of his peace and mine." Aaron finally spoke again, voice steady. "She's telling the truth. I let your expectations guide me more than I let my own heart guide me. That's on me, but I won't repeat it. Not with them." He nodded toward the twins. "My career will never outrank my family again. Not for a deal, not for a headline, not for anyone's approval." His father watched him, a slow, almost reluctant respect forming in his eyes. "You sound more like a man now than any quarterly report ever made you." Something softened fully in Flora at that. Margaret's gaze returned to Emma, who had evidently decided that the tablecloth pattern was more interesting than food. She bounced in her seat slightly, humming to herself. "May I hold her?" Margaret asked quietly, the question directed at Flora, not Aaron. Flora hesitated, every protective instinct alert. But Aaron's earlier promise echoed in her mind. "We leave if they cross the line. No debate. Let's see if she wants you," Flora said. She stood, walked around the table, and gently unbuckled Emma. The little girl reached back toward her at first, then noticed Margaret's outstretched arms and blinked. Flora crouched down to Emma's level. "You want to say hi?" she asked. "This is your grandma." The word felt strange on Flora's tongue, but not as impossible as it once did. Emma studied Margaret's face for a moment, then leaned forward, making her decision. Flora carefully transferred her to Margaret's lap. Margaret held the child a little stiffly at first, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. Emma, never one to tolerate tension for long, placed both hands on Margaret's cheeks and squeezed gently, smushing her face. Everyone at the table froze for a beat. Then, to everyone's surprise, including her own, Margaret laughed, a real laugh lighter than the polite chuckles she used at events, the kind of laugh Flora had never heard from her. Emma giggled in response and patted her again. "Gan?" she chirped, stumbling over the syllable. Margaret's eyes watered instantly. "Gran," she whispered back. "Yes, I'm your gran." Ryan, not to be left out, reached across the table toward Aaron's father. "Up!" The man looked momentarily, startled, then reached out. "Well, all right, young man." He lifted Ryan into his lap. The boy immediately grabbed his tie with great fascination. Flora and Aaron exchanged a look. No magic spell had been cast, no perfect healing in one lunch, but something important had taken root: honesty, boundaries, choice. As the meal went on, the conversation turned to lighter topics. Funny twin habits, stories of Aaron as a child, little anecdotes that slowly filled in gaps rather than digging into old wounds. Every once in a while, Margaret's old tone tried to creep back, but she caught herself more than once. At one point, she looked at Flora and said quietly, "Thank you for raising them so well. I can see they're loved." Flora nodded, throat thick. "Thank you for saying that. It wasn't absolution, but it was a beginning." On the way home, with the twins asleep in their car seats and the late afternoon sun laying long lines of light across the dashboard, Aaron drove in comfortable silence for a few minutes. "Thank you," he said eventually, eyes still on the road. "For what?" Flora asked. "For trusting me enough to walk into that room with me," he replied. "For saying what needed to be said without burning it all down." She smirked faintly. "I thought about burning it down." "I know," he chuckled. "I saw your face when my mom asked that first question." Her smile faded into something more serious. "They're not my favorite people yet. That may never happen. But I saw something today I didn't expect." "What's that?" he asked. "They listened," she said simply. "Not perfectly, not fully, but enough for me to believe this might actually work if we all keep doing the work." He nodded slowly. "I'm going to hold them to the boundaries you set. And I'm going to hold you to yours," she said. "No work on top of family pyramid anymore." He glanced at her with a small, crooked smile. "You have full permission to call me out if I even think about slipping." "Good," she replied. "Because I will." As they pulled into the parking lot of their complex, the twins stirred but didn't wake. Flora looked at their sleeping faces, their little chests rising and falling in sync. "We did something big today," she murmured. "Yeah," Aaron agreed. "We did." He turned off the engine, then sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel. In his mind, a new thought had been forming all week, quietly gaining strength. Today, watching Flora stand up with grace and strength in front of his parents, watching her protect their kids but still leave a door open, the thought solidified. He wanted to marry her again, not to fix the past, to honor the present. He glanced at her profile as she unbuckled Emma, her fingers gentle, her expression soft. He wouldn't rush it. But that night, after the twins were in bed and Flora slept, he opened the small box he'd kept tucked in the back of a drawer for longer than he cared to admit. Inside, the ring she had once given back caught the light from the street lamp outside, the stone glinting softly. He closed his hand around it, heart steady. Old money had once dictated everything. This time, he would set his own rules, not with grand parties, not with staged photos, just with a quiet question, a familiar ring, and the family they had finally begun to build on their own terms. The night after the lunch with his parents, Aaron barely slept, not from stress this time, but from the steady hum of a new certainty. The hum became a rhythm. The rhythm became a decision. It had taken months for him to learn how to be present, how to show up not through money or grand gestures, but through consistency, late-night feedings, diaper disasters, grocery runs, quiet support. He wanted Flora, not the glamorous version of her he once tried to fit into his world. He wanted her, and he wanted the life they were starting to build around the twins. So the next morning, after the twins' breakfast chaos and a short walk around the block, he waited until the apartment grew quiet, Emma asleep on the couch, Ryan curled up on a blanket, Flora finally taking the chance to sink into the corner of the sofa with a mug of tea. He stepped into the living room, the ring in his pocket feeling heavier than any quarterly report he'd ever reviewed. "Flora," he said gently. She looked up. "Yeah?" His mouth went dry. He cleared his throat, then took a slow, steadying breath. "There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Okay, what's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," he said quickly. "Actually, the opposite. Everything's finally starting to feel right, real, balanced. And last night, after the twins fell asleep, something hit me." She sat up a little. "What hit you?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he stepped closer, gently took the mug from her hand, and set it on the coffee table. Then he knelt down on one knee, not the dramatic drop of a grand proposal, but a slow, intentional movement that made her breath catch. "Aaron," she whispered, eyes widening. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small velvet box she hadn't seen in years. He opened it just enough for the familiar ring to glimmer in the soft living room light. Flora froze. He held her gaze. "This ring, I've kept it longer than I should have," he admitted quietly. "Not because I thought you'd come back someday out of obligation or guilt, but because I knew, deep down, that if I ever deserved to put this back on your finger, it would be because I'd changed, not you." Her eyes shimmered, lashes trembling. "I don't want the life we had before," he continued. "I don't want the big house and the empty rooms and schedules that never matched. I want this. I want waking up with toys on the floor. I want cooking breakfast with you while Emma sits on the counter stealing berries. I want Ryan dragging socks around like trophies. I want the small arguments about which grocery aisle has the right cereal. I want the real version of us, the US we didn't get the first time." He swallowed, voice lowering even more. "I love you, Flora. I never stopped. I just wasn't good at showing it when it mattered, but I'm better now, and I'll keep getting better. Because I choose you, I choose us, and I choose doing it right this time." Tears slipped down her cheeks before she could stop them. "You're asking me to marry you again," she whispered, voice soft and trembling. "Yes," he said simply. "I'm asking you to be my wife again, not to rewrite the past, but to build the future we deserved all along." As if on cue, Emma stirred and sat up on the couch, rubbing her eyes. She blinked at the sight of Aaron on one knee and toddled over, plopping herself right in his free arm. Ryan, not to be left out, crawled over too and settled at Flora's knee with a sleepy pout. The four of them formed a little circle, messy, imperfect, morning hair everywhere, but unbelievably right. Flora wiped her cheek, laughing through her tears. "You're really down there with one baby on your arm and one at my leg," he grinned, "just making sure you see the full package." She shook her head, smiling. Then she placed her hand in his. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Aaron. I'll marry you again." His breath left him in a shaky laugh. Relief and joy tangled together. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit exactly as it had before, only this time it felt earned. He leaned forward, pressed his forehead against hers, and kissed her, slow, gentle, reverent. Emma squealed and clapped her hands. Ryan climbed into both their laps like he understood this was a family moment. They ended the kiss, laughing into each other's shoulders, as the twins attempted to wedge themselves directly between them. "Guess they approve," Flora said. "I'll take that as the official family blessing," Aaron replied. 2 months passed before the wedding. They didn't hurry, didn't rush. They let life flow. Morning routines, community center meetings, quiet dinners, stroller walks, budget talks, bedtimes. Sometimes they had arguments, tiny ones about chores, bigger ones about logistics, but they ended each one with honesty, not avoidance. When they finally decided to choose a date, they knew exactly where they wanted the ceremony: Flora's church. Not a ballroom, not a mansion, not a rooftop or vineyard. Just a simple church with wooden pews and a pastor who'd known Flora since she was a teenager, trying to find her place in the world. The day of the ceremony was warm, not too hot, not too cold, and sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows in soft colors. The church had been gently decorated by Flora's friends from the community center, using flowers they'd arranged themselves. Nothing expensive, nothing overdone. Just love arranged in petals and ribbon. Flora stood in a small side room wearing a simple white dress. No train, no corset, just clean lines and soft fabric that moved when she breathed. Her hair framed her face naturally, with small twists pinned with tiny pearls. She held Emma on her hip, while Ryan tugged at the hem of her dress, proudly wearing a tiny vest and bow tie that made him look both adorable and mildly confused about what was happening. "You look beautiful," her mother said behind her, smiling proudly. Flora exhaled. "I feel calm, which is weird. I thought I'd be nervous." "That's your sign," her mother said. "You're walking toward peace this time, not pressure." The doors opened slightly. Aaron stepped inside, not to peek at her, but to hand off a small bouquet she'd forgotten on the pew earlier. He kept his eyes down respectfully. "I'm not looking," he said quickly, voice warm. "Just dropping this off." She laughed. "Thank you." He paused at the door for just a second, his voice softer. "I'll be right there at the end of the aisle." "I know," she replied. The twins were escorted out to join the small procession. Emma toddled down with help from Flora's mother, clutching a tiny flower basket she shook upside down more than once. Petals went everywhere, but everyone laughed and clapped. Ryan followed, holding the hand of one of the teens from the center, proudly showing off his bow tie to anyone who looked at him. Then it was Flora's turn. When she stepped into the main aisle, the crowd, small, mixed, filled with people from both sides of their lives, turned to see her. There were no gasps, no dramatic announcements, just smiles, warmth, and the sound of soft music playing. Aaron stood at the front, wearing a suit that fit him well but didn't drown him in wealth or flash. His tie was slightly crooked, likely from Ryan yanking it earlier, but he left it that way. He wanted to show up as the real him. When he saw Flora walk toward him, his eyes softened completely. His hand went to his heart, instinctively, like the sight physically hit him. She walked slow, steady, grace in every step. When she reached him, he took her hand gently, like it was something sacred. "You look like everything I prayed for but didn't know how to ask," he whispered. "Good," she whispered back, "because you're exactly who I hoped you'd become." The pastor smiled at them, a kind warmth in his eyes. "Well," he said lightly, "looks like we're already off to a heartfelt start." The ceremony was simple, vows spoken from the heart, hands held tightly, the twins making random noises that made the guests giggle. At one point, Ryan escaped his designated row and ran directly to Aaron, wrapping around his leg. The pastor paused, chuckled, and said, "Looks like someone wants to be part of this vow, too." Aaron bent down, scooped him up, and kept Ryan in one arm while he finished repeating his vows, with the other hand holding Flora's. There was no big choir, no professional photographer, no signature cocktail or designer decorations. There was just love, and laughter, and honesty, and the quiet hum of a family that had rebuilt itself with steady hands. When they kissed, the church erupted into soft cheers. Emma clapped her hands wildly from Flora's mother's lap. They were married again, but this time they were ready. Months later, life found its rhythm, a real one. Their home was slightly bigger now, still in the same neighborhood, still warm and lived in, toys everywhere, art projects taped to the fridge, a little table in the corner where Flora painted when the twins napped, sunlight pooling over her work. In the living room, Aaron lay on the floor with Emma climbing on his back like a tiny mountain explorer, and Ryan using his chest as a seat. His phone buzzed with a meeting reminder, but instead of groaning, he tapped reschedule and set it for a time after preschool drop-off the next day. "Yep," Aaron said, lifting Ryan into the air and making airplane sounds. "My boss said family comes first." She leaned against the frame, smiling. "Your boss?" "Me," he smirked. "I'm very strict about it." She shook her head, laughing softly. "You've changed." He glanced up at her. "I didn't change, I grew. Big difference." She crossed the room and sat beside him, placing a kiss on his temple. "I'm proud of you." He kissed her hand. "I'm proud of us." The twins piled onto both of them, squealing, giggling, wrapping arms around necks and climbing ungracefully over limbs. When the noise settled a little, and the twins wandered off to investigate their block tower, Flora leaned her head on Aaron's shoulder. "So what's the lesson today?" she asked. "You always like to end things neatly." He smiled. "I think it's simple." She waited. "You can't buy presents," he said softly. "You can't outsource love, and you can't heal a family by pretending nothing's wrong. You heal it by choosing better every day." She touched his cheek. "And by protecting your kids without shutting the whole world out." He nodded. "Exactly." The twins shrieked with laughter as their tower fell apart again. And in that little living room, with the sun pouring in and joy scattered everywhere, their story found its peace. If you're watching this right now, family, tell us in the comments. What's your biggest takeaway from Aaron and Flora's journey? What did you learn about second chances, healing, and choosing love even when it's hard? If this story touched you, please like, share, and subscribe to Stories by Mr. Flex so we can keep bringing powerful life lessons to your screen.